The setting sun painted golden streaks across the polished marble floors of the Sullivan Mansion's living room. I stood still, taking in the reflection of my tall frame in the mirror. Nearby, Patricia, my wife, adjusted the neckline of her red dress. Its daring design clung to her figure, plunging far lower than what any corporate spouse would wear to an event of tonight's magnitude. "That dress," I said, my voice calm and deliberate, "sends the wrong message." Her fingers lingered on the fabric, smoothing it over her hips with practiced slowness. "It's always about your image, isn't it, Lawrence?" She picked up her lipstick, adding a bold layer of crimson. "God forbid I want to feel beautiful for once. Not everything revolves around Sullivan Technologies." Her words hit me harder than they should have. As CEO of a cybersecurity empire, I'd built my career and my life on noticing the smallest inconsistencies. Lately, my wife's behavior had been riddled with anomalies: unexplained absences, abruptly ended phone calls, personal training sessions that dragged on too long. And then there were the credit card charges from local hotels and the sudden appearance of new jewelry she claimed to have had for years. Instead of answering her, I glanced at my phone. A message from Chris Berger, my head of security, confirmed what I already suspected. I'd hired Chris years ago for his unrelenting efficiency and loyalty, traits I valued in myself. His message read, "Team is in position." "I need to handle something at the office before the gala," I said, adjusting the platinum cufflinks Patricia had gifted me on our 5th anniversary. The sight of them now filled me with nothing but disdain. "I'll meet you there." She barely acknowledged my departure, too preoccupied with her preparations. It was as if I didn't exist. Perhaps I was only now allowing myself to see how indifferent she'd become. As I descended the curved staircase, the weight of her betrayal settled on me. The family portraits lining the walls suddenly felt like props in a stage play. The life we'd built, seemingly founded on integrity and love, was a lie. But if Patricia thought she could undermine everything I'd worked for, she had no idea who she was dealing with. Sliding into my Tesla, I activated the secure line to Chris. "Begin Protocol 7, I ordered, my voice steady. "Sir," Chris said hesitantly, "that level of monitoring is unprecedented." "Do it," I replied. "And Chris, this stays between us." By the time I reached Sullivan Technologies' towering glass headquarters, my suspicions were no longer just suspicions. In a secure room 3 levels below ground, I watched Patricia's arrival at the gala through high-definition surveillance feeds. Her red dress turned heads as she floated effortlessly among the crowd, every move calculated. But it was her interaction with Herman Black, my supposed best friend, that confirmed everything. On screen, she sidled up to him at the bar, her hand brushing his arm with an intimacy that set my blood boiling. "You're playing a dangerous game tonight, Pat," Herman murmured, his fingers trailing lightly over her waist. "Lawrence still suspects nothing," she whispered back, her lips dangerously close to his ear. "The shell companies are in place. Once the merger goes through, everything changes." My jaw tightened as I watched their secret unfold. The merger I had poured years of work into wasn't just a corporate deal, it was a trap. Patricia wasn't merely unfaithful. She was part of a conspiracy involving Herman, Jared Norton, and even my own brother, Guillermo. Chris appeared behind me, tablet in hand. "Sir, it's worse than we thought." He wasn't exaggerating. Surveillance footage and decrypted files painted a picture of betrayal so vast it nearly took my breath away. Patricia had used her position as my wife to gather compromising information on board members, sabotaged my relationships with my children, and manipulated events to stage my downfall. Guillermo had been siphoning millions from fake R&D projects, while Herman had been selling company secrets to fund lavish vacations with Patricia. "Show me everything," I ordered. And so, for hours, I pieced together the details of the elaborate plot to hollow out Sullivan Technologies. Patricia wasn't just after me. She was after my legacy, the empire I had built for my children. It was clear. Patricia and her co-conspirators believed they had won. They saw me as distracted, blind to the threats inside my own home. They couldn't have been more wrong. At that moment, I made my decision. If they wanted to see the extent of my ruthlessness, I would show them. The red dress Patricia wore tonight wouldn't be a symbol of her triumph. It would become the mark of her downfall. The Tesla hummed quietly as I drove back toward Sullivan Technologies, the sound of my own heartbeat louder in my ears than the car. Patricia's betrayal wasn't the blow I'd thought it might be. Instead, it fueled a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The pieces of their conspiracy were falling into place, and the part of my brain trained to identify patterns, weaknesses, and breaches went to work. Once inside the company headquarters, I made my way to the secure underground facility. The team I trusted most was already gathered. Chris Berger, my head of security, Brooke Adams, my executive assistant of 8 years, and a select group of cybersecurity and legal experts. Each of them had proven their loyalty countless times before. They were the only ones I trusted to see this plan through. Chris met my gaze as I entered the room. "We've expanded surveillance, sir. Every channel is live." "Good," I said, settling into the chair at the head of the table. "From this moment forward, nothing happens without my authorization. Begin Protocol 0. The room fell silent, and then Chris gave a single nod. "Understood. Protocol 0 wasn't something I'd ever intended to use. It was a last resort safeguard, a plan designed for the absolute worst-case scenario. When I first drafted it, I thought it would be to defend against external threats, hostile takeovers, state-sponsored cyber attacks, or industrial espionage. I never imagined I'd have to use it to protect my company from those closest to me." The monitors on the walls lit up, each displaying a different feed. One camera showed Patricia twirling in Herman's arms at the gala, her red dress a beacon of arrogance. Another captured Guillermo shaking hands with investors, a false smile plastered on his face. Sandy, my sister-in-law, watched from a corner of the ballroom, her expression one of quiet satisfaction. Every move they made was being recorded, documented, and analyzed. "Let's go over the key players," I said, leaning forward. Chris stepped to the front, his tablet linked to the monitors. "Herman Black," he began, "formerly your closest confidant. His primary role in the conspiracy has been selling proprietary company data to competitors. We've traced the funds to offshore accounts. He's also been funneling money into the shell companies Patricia helped set up. Images of Herman's lavish vacations and luxury purchases appeared on the screen. Villas in the Mediterranean, private jet charters, all of it funded by my stolen resources. "Guillermo Sullivan," Chris continued, shifting to the next monitor. "Your brother has been running ghost projects through the R&D department. He's siphoned millions through fake research initiatives. The money trail leads to offshore accounts linked to Patricia's network." My jaw tightened as Guillermo's face filled the screen. I'd trusted him with the creative heart of Sullivan Technologies, and he'd turned it into a black hole of fraud. "Sandy Black," Chris went on, his tone growing colder. "She's been using stolen Sullivan Technologies patents to build a parallel company. They've already secured investors and plan to launch competing products the moment you're ousted." Brooke chimed in. "We've confirmed that she's been meeting with key board members, planting doubts about your leadership. She's positioning herself to take control once Patricia and Herman execute their part of the plan." "And Patricia?" I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Chris hesitated, then tapped his tablet. Patricia's face appeared on the largest monitor, captured in crystal-clear high definition, as she laughed with Herman. "She's been orchestrating the entire operation," Chris said, "gathering information, sabotaging relationships, and manipulating people inside the company to ensure her success. She's built a blackmail portfolio on several board members to secure their votes for your removal." The scale of her betrayal was staggering, but I didn't let it show. What's the timeline for the merger? I asked. 7 days, Brooke replied. They plan to finalize the deal at the next board meeting. Once it's approved, the shell companies will siphon funds, and the patent Sandy stole will allow their new company to launch immediately after. 7 days. That's all the time I had to dismantle a conspiracy years in the making. Fortunately, I didn't need more than that. My enemies had underestimated me, and that would be their undoing. Here's the plan, I said, standing. Chris, I want full control of the surveillance network. Record everything. Brooke, begin gathering evidence, emails, financial transactions, anything that ties them to the conspiracy. We'll need an airtight case. Brooke nodded, already typing on her laptop. Next, I continued, I want all assets tied to the shell companies frozen. Every account, every property, every investment, lock it down. Chris raised an eyebrow. That'll take some maneuvering, sir. We'll need to work through legal channels, and it could raise suspicions. Let them suspect, I said. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late. The room buzzed with activity as my team set to work. I returned to the monitors, watching Patricia's every move. Her confidence was sickening. She thought she'd won, that she was untouchable, but I'd spent my entire career protecting Sullivan Technologies from threats like her. She might have infiltrated my home and my heart, but she'd never truly understood who I was. Hours later, I was back in my office, reviewing files Brooke had compiled. The evidence against Patricia and her co-conspirators was damning. Emails detailing the shell companies, bank statements showing the flow of stolen money, and surveillance footage of clandestine meetings, it was all there. But one document caught my attention. It was a transcript of text messages between Patricia and Mandy's teachers. My daughter had been struggling in school for months, and I'd assumed it was just teenage rebellion. Now I knew better. Patricia had been actively sabotaging my relationship with Mandy, planting seeds of doubt about my commitment as a father. I clenched my fists, anger rising in my chest. Patricia hadn't just betrayed me, she'd tried to poison my children against me. That was unforgivable. Sir? Brooke's voice interrupted my thoughts. She stood in the doorway, holding a folder. We've secured Mandy's location. She's agreed to leave with you. A wave of relief washed over me. Good. And Bill? His college accounts have been transferred to a secure trust, she said. He doesn't know the full extent of what's happening, but he's protected. Thank you, Brooke, I said. You've done excellent work. She gave a small smile. It's an honor, sir. Once she left, I turned back to the monitors. Patricia was still at the gala, dancing with Herman as if she hadn't just destroyed everything we'd built together. She had no idea that by the time she came home, her world would begin to crumble. At midnight, Chris confirmed the first phase of the plan was complete. The shell companies were locked down, their accounts inaccessible. Patricia and Herman's phones briefly lost signal as their access to the funds was severed. The new encryption protocols had taken effect, securing Sullivan Technologies' data behind a wall even the most skilled hackers couldn't breach. Trigger the contract clauses, I told Brooke. She nodded, typing rapidly on her keyboard. The hidden clauses were activated, effectively giving me control of the assets Patricia and her co-conspirators had tried to steal. By the time Patricia sipped her last glass of champagne, everything she thought she'd gained was gone. The divorce papers were already being delivered to our home, along with evidence of her crimes. Selected board members were receiving the same evidence, ensuring their loyalty remained with me. As dawn approached, I stood at the window of my office watching the city wake up. Patricia believed she was on the cusp of victory, but she was wrong. She'd just declared war on the wrong man. This was only the beginning. The sun's first rays barely peeked over the San Francisco skyline as I stepped out of the office. My plan was in motion, but there was no time for rest. Patricia and her co-conspirators thought they were celebrating their triumph. They had no idea that their downfall had already begun. As I walked to my car, Chris fell into step beside me. His expression was as sharp and focused as ever. "Phase 1 is complete," he said. Accounts frozen, contracts activated, and surveillance is holding steady. We've also secured more evidence from Guillermo's R&D department, ghost projects, fraudulent expense reports, all tied to the offshore accounts. Good, I replied, but I want more than evidence. I want them to feel the ground shift beneath their feet. Chris's lips curled into the slightest smirk. Understood. Back at the mansion, the tension was palpable as I entered the living room. Patricia wasn't home yet. No doubt she was still reveling in her supposed victory. The house felt colder, emptier, and more like a set than a home. It wasn't just because of the betrayal. It was the realization that everything I'd built here had been compromised. I ascended the stairs, stopping briefly at Mandy's room. She'd been staying at a friend's house, as arranged through my team. I pushed the door open and looked around. The evidence of Patricia's manipulation was everywhere, from the staged conflicts to the subtle erosion of trust between us. A pile of unopened letters from me sat on the desk, intercepted and altered by Patricia. I felt the familiar burn of anger but quickly tempered it. Mandy was safe now, and she'd see the truth soon enough. My focus had to remain on the endgame. The following afternoon, the first cracks began to show. Patricia returned home late in the morning, her usual arrogance faltering as she saw the envelope waiting for her on the kitchen counter. I watched from the security feed as she opened it. The moment she saw the divorce papers and the attached evidence of her infidelity and crimes, her face drained of color. She looked around the room as if expecting to find me there. I wasn't. I wanted her to feel the weight of isolation. Let her realize, if only for a moment, how completely she had miscalculated. Her phone buzzed and she answered quickly. "Herman, we have a problem," she hissed, her voice panicked. "I know," Herman replied, his tone sharp. "The accounts are frozen. Everything's gone. What did you do?" "What did I do?" she snapped, pacing the room. "This is your mess too." Their argument grew louder, each blaming the other, their voices echoing through the quiet house. I turned off the feed. Their infighting was predictable, but it wasn't what I needed to hear. What mattered was that their confidence was unraveling. Meanwhile, Guillermo was the next to feel the effects. At his office in the R&D department, federal auditors arrived unannounced, carrying subpoenas and boxes for evidence collection. Through the surveillance feed, I watched him pale as they began questioning his staff and seizing files. "Excuse me, what's the meaning of this?" Guillermo demanded, his voice wavering. One of the auditors calmly handed him a warrant. "We're here to investigate allegations of fraud and embezzlement tied to your department." Guillermo stammered, trying to maintain his composure, but the writing was on the wall. Every ghost project, every fake initiative he'd orchestrated was meticulously documented. The auditors wouldn't leave until they had everything they needed, and they wouldn't need long. At the same time, Sandy received her own shock. Her company's critical servers experienced a catastrophic failure, and her IT team scrambled to recover data. Emails from potential investors began pouring in, each more frantic than the last. "What's going on?" Sandy demanded, storming into her office. Her lead technician looked up, sweat beading on his brow. "We've been hit with multiple security breaches. Data is leaking. Investors are pulling out." Sandy's face twisted with frustration. "How is this happening? Fix it!" The technician hesitated. "It's not that simple. It's like someone's targeting us deliberately." Someone was. Every move she'd made to build her company had been based on stolen Sullivan Technologies patents. Now, those patents were being reclaimed through carefully timed legal actions. Injunctions froze her assets, while cease and desist orders flooded her inbox. The foundation of her company was crumbling beneath her. Herman, on the other hand, faced a different kind of collapse. His offshore accounts were completely inaccessible, leaving him unable to pay for his extravagant lifestyle. His phone buzzed relentlessly with notifications. Access denied, transfer failed, account suspended. "Fix this!" He barked into the phone, but there was no one left to help him. Every avenue he tried led to a dead end. The money was gone, legally reclaimed through the contracts and clauses he and Patricia had overlooked. While they floundered, I turned my attention to solidifying my own position. Brooke worked tirelessly, coordinating with my legal team and preparing evidence packages for select board members. By the time the next meeting arrived, they would have no doubt about where their loyalty should lie. Chris oversaw the continued surveillance, ensuring nothing escaped our notice. Every text message, phone call, and meeting among the conspirators was monitored. Their desperation grew with each passing hour, their confidence crumbling under the weight of their failures. That evening, Patricia attempted to confront me. I had just returned to the office when she stormed in, her face a mask of fury and fear. "Where have you been?" she demanded, slamming the door behind her. "What's going on? Why are our accounts frozen?" I regarded her calmly, taking a moment to let the silence stretch. "Our accounts aren't frozen," I said evenly. "Your accounts are frozen." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" I stood and walked around the desk, keeping my tone measured. "You thought you could betray me, steal from me, and I wouldn't notice? Did you really think I wouldn't see through you, Patricia?" Her face twisted with anger. "You're paranoid! You're imagining things!" I held up a folder, thick with evidence. "This isn't imagination. This is everything. Every lie, every scheme, every betrayal. You thought you were so clever, but you underestimated me." For a moment she was silent, her confidence faltering. Then she lashed out, her voice rising. "You can't prove anything. Herman and I—" "Herman?" I interrupted, my voice like ice. "He's already falling apart. Do you think he'll protect you when his own neck is on the line?" Her bravado faded, replaced by fear. I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. "You've lost, Patricia. Everything you built on lies is crumbling. And you brought this on yourself." She left without another word, slamming the door behind her. I returned to my desk, watching as the sun set over the city. Patricia thought she could confront me and regain control, but she didn't realize that she was already in checkmate. By the end of the day, the pieces were moving faster than I anticipated. Guillermo's fraudulent projects were exposed. Sandy's company was on the verge of collapse. Herman's finances were in ruins. Patricia was unraveling, her confidence replaced by desperation. The web was tightening, and I was just getting started. The morning came with a cold, quiet intensity, a reminder that every move I'd orchestrated was building toward a crescendo. Patricia, Herman, Guillermo, and Sandy still didn't fully grasp the scope of what was happening. They had underestimated not just my ability to retaliate, but my patience. That was their fatal mistake. I arrived at Sullivan Technologies early, taking the elevator to the secure room where Chris and Brooke were waiting. The monitors lining the walls showed live feeds of my enemies, their every move scrutinized. Each one was now entangled in their own unraveling. "Status update," I said as I settled into my chair. Chris stepped forward, his tablet in hand. "Herman is officially panicking. He's tried contacting several of his former allies for help, but no one's answering. His accounts are still frozen, and he's running out of options." Guillermo had another visit from federal auditors this morning. They've started seizing assets linked to his ghost projects. Sandy is trying to rally support from her investors, but the injunctions have scared them off. She's also dealing with a massive data leak. Brooke added, "Patricia spent the night making frantic calls to her lawyers. They've reviewed the divorce papers and the attached evidence, and it's clear there's no way for her to contest it. She's out of her depth." I nodded, satisfaction settling into my chest. "Good. Let's move to phase 2. Chris's expression shifted slightly. "Are you sure, sir? It's a significant escalation." "They've already lost control," I replied. "It's time to take everything." Herman's downfall began that afternoon. Sitting in his high-rise office, he stared at his computer screen, his face pale as his accountant delivered the final blow. Every offshore account is empty, the accountant said, his voice tight with fear. The funds have been legally reclaimed under the clauses in Sullivan Technologies contracts. There's nothing left. Herman slammed his fists on the desk. This can't be happening. Find a way to fix it. There's no fixing this, the accountant replied, his tone resigned. You've been outmaneuvered. Across town, federal agents arrived at Guillermo's department with warrants for his arrest. They marched into his office, their presence causing an immediate ripple of panic among his staff. Guillermo stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief as they presented the charges: fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. This is ridiculous, he stammered. There must be some mistake. One of the agents responded coldly. The evidence says otherwise. As they escorted him out of the building, his co-workers whispered among themselves. Guillermo, the once celebrated visionary of Sullivan Technologies R&D, was now nothing more than a common criminal. Sandy's collapse was more public and far more humiliating. That evening, during a meeting with potential investors, she received a series of alerts on her phone. Her company's servers had failed completely, and key clients were withdrawing their contracts. "What's going on?" one of the investors demanded. Sandy tried to salvage the meeting, her voice shaking as she assured them it was a temporary issue. But the investors weren't convinced. One by one, they left, their confidence in her abilities shattered. By the time the meeting ended, Sandy was alone in the boardroom, staring at the screen of her phone as the last vestiges of her company slipped away. Patricia, meanwhile, faced a more personal kind of destruction. Her attempts to contact Herman were met with silence. He had already begun distancing himself, knowing that any association with her would only worsen his situation. In desperation, Patricia turned to Guillermo, leaving him frantic voicemails as she paced the living room of the mansion. "Guillermo, we need to talk," she said, her voice edged with panic. "This is getting out of control. Call me back." But Guillermo was in no position to help her. Sitting in a holding cell, his hands trembling, he realized that his only chance of avoiding a lengthy prison sentence was to cooperate with the authorities. And the authorities wanted one thing: a full account of Patricia's involvement. While my enemies floundered, I focused on securing the future. Mandy had returned home after learning the truth about Patricia's manipulations. She was furious at her mother but directed that anger towards something productive. Sitting in the office beside me, she worked with the cybersecurity team to analyze the data we'd collected. "I can't believe she did this," Mandy said, her voice tight with emotion. "She tried to turn me against you." "She underestimated you," I replied, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "But you saw through it. That's what matters." Brooke entered the room, a stack of documents in her hand. "Sir, the board members have received the evidence packages. Their responses have been overwhelmingly in your favor. Patricia's blackmail attempts are officially dead in the water." "Excellent," I said, reviewing the files. "Make sure the remaining board members are briefed before the meeting. I want unanimous support." Brooke nodded, her efficiency unwavering. "Consider it done." By the time evening fell, the consequences of their actions were fully realized. Herman received a call from one of his lawyers who informed him that federal charges were being prepared against him. His fraudulent dealings, meticulously documented by my team, were airtight. "This is a nightmare," Herman muttered, pouring himself a drink. But even the alcohol couldn't dull the weight of his impending doom. Guillermo signed a plea deal that night, agreeing to testify against Patricia and the others in exchange for a reduced sentence. His betrayal was predictable, but it served my purposes perfectly. With his testimony, the case against Patricia would be unassailable. Sandy, desperate to save what little remained of her reputation, issued a public statement blaming her company's failures on sabotage. But her words rang hollow. The industry had already blacklisted her, and no one was willing to take a chance on an executive with such a tainted record. Patricia, now completely isolated, made one final attempt to reach me. She called my office late that night, her voice a mixture of desperation and defiance. "Lawrence, we need to talk," she said. "You can't just shut me out like this." I listened silently, letting her words hang in the air before responding. "There's nothing to talk about, Patricia. You made your choices. Now you'll live with the consequences." Before she could reply, I hung up, cutting her off for good. As I sat in my office, watching the city lights flicker outside the window, I reflected on how far I'd come. Patricia and her allies had thought they could destroy me, but all they had done was hasten their own downfall. Every move they made had played into my hands, and now they were paying the price. The first fall was complete, but there was still more to come. The days that followed marked the steady, inevitable collapse of the conspirators. Every thread of their plan unraveled with precision, and every step of their destruction played out exactly as I had envisioned. Patricia, Herman, Guillermo, Sandy, and Jared Norton, the architect of their corporate treachery, were now trapped with no escape. The first to publicly crumble was Herman. His fall came in a torrent of scandal and disgrace. News of his fraudulent dealings with competitors hit the media like a thunderclap. The story spread quickly. A former industry leader exposed for selling proprietary company secrets in exchange for personal gain. The leaked evidence was irrefutable. Bank transfers, meeting recordings, and emails that painted a damning picture. Herman tried to deny everything during a hastily organized press conference. "These allegations are baseless," he said, his voice strained and defensive. "I've always operated with integrity." But the evidence spoke louder than his hollow words. The media wasn't interested in his denials, especially when videos surfaced of him in compromising situations, not just with Patricia, but with multiple other women. His attempts to blame others only made things worse. Every desperate statement he made was swiftly countered by another piece of evidence, another revelation of his lies. By the end of the week, Herman's reputation was in tatters. Federal agents arrived at his home, handcuffing him on live television as neighbors and reporters watched. His carefully constructed life, his wealth, his prestige, his connections, was gone in an instant. Guillermo's collapse was quieter, but no less devastating. After signing his plea deal, he cooperated fully with federal investigators, providing detailed testimony about his role in the conspiracy. His confession included everything: the ghost projects, the embezzlement, the offshore accounts. In doing so, he sealed his own fate as a pariah. Word spread quickly through the industry. Guillermo Sullivan, once a respected figure in R&D, was now persona non grata. His co-workers at Sullivan Technologies, those who had once admired his creativity and leadership, turned their backs on him. His family, those who weren't directly involved in the conspiracy, disowned him entirely. Guillermo's wife filed for divorce, taking their children and leaving him to face his consequences alone. With no money, no career, and no allies, Guillermo took a job as a security guard at a strip mall. A cruel irony for a man who had once overseen multi-million-dollar projects. Sandy fought harder to hold on to her company, but her efforts were futile. The cybersecurity breaches that had exposed her stolen patents were only the beginning. Investors pulled out in droves, leaving her without the funds to sustain operations. Lawsuits followed, each one bringing more damning evidence of her theft and deception. She attempted to shift the blame, claiming she had been sabotaged by competitors. But her words carried no weight. The legal filings against her included emails, contracts, and even internal memos proving her complicity in the conspiracy. Her once thriving company dissolved within weeks, and Sandy found herself facing personal bankruptcy. In a desperate bid to salvage her reputation, she reached out to old industry contacts, hoping to secure a position at another firm. Every door was closed to her. The name Sandy Black was now synonymous with betrayal and failure. Her fall from grace was complete. Jared Norton, the mastermind behind the merger scheme, fared no better. His immunity deal, which had shielded him from prosecution, was revoked after investigators uncovered evidence he had withheld. The real records, documents he had hidden to protect himself, were brought to light, thanks to my team's meticulous efforts. The federal government filed multiple indictments against Jared, charging him with conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. His attempts to negotiate a new deal were met with cold rejection. The prosecutors had everything they needed, and they had no reason to show him mercy. Jared's fall was swift and brutal. His assets were seized, his reputation destroyed, and his career ended. For a man who had spent decades manipulating others to achieve his goals, there was a bitter irony in watching his carefully built empire crumble. Patricia's collapse, however, was the most personal and satisfying of all. Isolated from her co-conspirators, abandoned by Herman, and with no access to my wealth, she faced a reality she had never prepared for. The lavish lifestyle she had clung to so desperately was gone. Her attempts to reach out to her former social circle were met with icy rejection. Once admired for her charm and beauty, Patricia was now a pariah. Her name became a whispered warning among San Francisco's elite, a cautionary tale of greed and betrayal. But Patricia's greatest loss was yet to come. That week, she received court documents informing her that Herman's sister, Ronnie, was suing for full custody of Thomas. The evidence of Patricia's neglect, compiled over months by my team, was overwhelming. Surveillance footage, medical records, and testimonies from teachers and neighbors painted a damning picture. Patricia tried to fight the case, but she lacked the resources and the support. When the court ruled in Ronnie's favor, Patricia was left with nothing. Her supervised visitation rights were a hollow consolation, a reminder of the life she had destroyed through her own choices. While my enemies suffered, I focused on rebuilding. The board meeting that had once threatened my position as CEO became an opportunity to solidify my leadership. Brooke presented the evidence packages to the remaining board members, each one meticulously compiled to show the depth of the conspiracy. One by one, the board members expressed their support. Patricia's blackmail attempts were exposed, and the conspirators' influence over the company was eradicated. By the end of the meeting, the board had voted unanimously to give me complete control of Sullivan Technologies. My children, Mandy and Bill, became an integral part of the company's future. Mandy, with her sharp mind and keen understanding of cybersecurity, took on a leadership role in the tech division. Bill, fresh from law school, joined the legal team, using his knowledge to protect the company from future threats. The conspirators' collapse wasn't just a victory for me. It was a warning to anyone who might consider betraying the Sullivan legacy. Their names became cautionary tales, their stories lessons in the consequences of greed and arrogance. As I stood in my office, watching the sun set over the city, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The red dress Patricia had worn to the gala now hung framed on the wall, a reminder of the night her betrayal was exposed. It was no longer a symbol of her triumph, but of her downfall. Justice had been served, but the final act of my revenge was yet to come. The reckoning began as a crescendo, years in the making, every note perfectly timed. By the time Patricia, Herman, Guillermo, Sandy, and Jared realized the full scope of their downfall, it was far too late. Their financial ruin, social ostracism, and mounting legal troubles weren't just isolated events. They were calculated steps, each one leading inexorably to their undoing. Patricia, always the most defiant, made one last attempt to salvage her position. She arrived unannounced at Nova Technologies, my newly established empire, clutching Thomas's hand. The boy, now 5, looked at her with nervous curiosity, clearly unprepared for the storm she intended to unleash. The security cameras tracked her as she stormed into the lobby, demanding to see me. "Tell Lawrence his wife is here," she declared, her tone dripping with entitlement. The receptionist, unfazed, replied coolly, "There's no Lawrence Sullivan here, ma'am." "Ex-wife," Patricia corrected, fumbling through her purse. She pulled out a photograph of Thomas. And I know he's here. This company, this building, it's his. The boy. He needs to meet his father. Upstairs, I watched the scene unfold on the surveillance feed, my expression unreadable. Chris stood nearby, his arms crossed. She's desperate, he remarked, trying to use the kid as leverage. I turned to my tablet where the results of a DNA test glowed on the screen. Months earlier, my team had quietly obtained samples to confirm what I already suspected. Thomas wasn't mine. He was Herman's son, a fact Patricia had hoped to conceal until she could exploit it. Let her come up, I said finally. It's time she learned there's no leverage left. 10 minutes later, Patricia burst into my office, dragging Thomas behind her. She froze when she saw me, her confident facade cracking as she took in the room. I sat behind my desk, calm and composed, while the monitors displayed a rotating slideshow of evidence, surveillance footage, financial records, court filings. The weight of it was palpable. "You've been here all along," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Sit down, Patricia," I said evenly. "We need to discuss Thomas's future." She hesitated, then sank into the chair across from me, clutching her purse like a lifeline. Thomas, forgotten for the moment, wandered to the corner of the room where a familiar red dress hung framed on the wall. He stared at it curiously, his small fingers reaching out, but not touching. "Why don't we start with this?" I slid the DNA results across the desk. "Thomas isn't my son. He's Herman's." Patricia's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult my intelligence," I said sharply. "The evidence is irrefutable. And while we're on the subject, let's address the trust fund I established for him. The same trust you've been siphoning money from for years. Every dollar meant to support Thomas has been carefully documented, including the ones you used to finance your personal schemes." She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. "You've missed doctor's appointments, skipped school conferences, and left him alone while you chased fantasies of reclaiming my fortune. And now you think you can waltz in here and use him to manipulate me?" Her bravado crumbled, replaced by something raw and desperate. "He needs stability," she said, her voice cracking. "You can't just abandon him." "That's exactly why I've supported Ronnie's custody petition," I replied. "Unlike you, she's proven capable of providing a stable environment. The court agrees. Effective immediately, Thomas will live with her." Patricia's shoulders sagged as the final blow landed. The boy she had hoped to use as a bargaining chip was now beyond her reach. While Patricia faced her reckoning, the others fared no better. Herman, now serving his sentence in a federal prison, became the poster child for corporate fraud. His arrogance had evaporated, replaced by the grim reality of life behind bars. His appeals were rejected one after another, each denial a reminder of how thoroughly I had dismantled him. Guillermo, now a middle-aged security guard, struggled to adapt to his new reality. The man who once commanded multi-million-dollar budgets now spent his days patrolling strip malls and his nights drowning in regret. His plea deal had spared him a lengthy prison sentence, but it had cost him everything else: his family, his career, and his dignity. Sandy's life had shrunk to a small, dimly lit apartment on the outskirts of the city. Blacklisted from the industry, she scraped by on freelance work, each gig a far cry from the power she once wielded. Her attempts to rebuild her reputation were met with closed doors and cold shoulders. She had become a ghost, her name synonymous with failure. Jared Norton, the mastermind who had orchestrated the merger scheme, faced the most complex downfall. The multiple indictments against him piled up, each one carrying a potential prison sentence. His attempts to negotiate a new deal with prosecutors were met with indifference. No one cared about his excuses or his regrets. With my enemies neutralized, I turned my attention to the future. Nova Technologies thrived under the leadership of my trusted team. Mandy had proven herself as a cybersecurity expert, her insights shaping the company's cutting-edge protocols. Bill excelled in the legal department, his understanding of corporate law sharpened by his first-hand experience documenting Guillermo's crimes. Brooke, now CEO, guided the company with the same precision and loyalty she had shown throughout the ordeal. Her leadership had brought the company to new heights, earning the respect of employees and board members alike. Chris expanded his role, overseeing global security operations for the company. His vigilance ensured that no threat, internal or external, would ever come close to what I had faced before. As for Patricia, her life spiraled further into obscurity. With no resources and no support, she took a retail job at a department store, her once impeccable appearance now a shadow of its former self. Her attempts to reconnect with Thomas were met with resistance. Ronnie ensured the boy grew up in a stable, loving environment, far removed from his mother's toxic influence. Her fall from grace was complete, a far cry from the woman who had once stood at my side, plotting my destruction. She became a ghost, her name a cautionary tale whispered in society circles and corporate boardrooms. The red dress still hung in my office, framed behind bulletproof glass. It was no longer a symbol of betrayal, but of triumph, a reminder that justice, when served with patience and precision, was more powerful than any act of vengeance. As I sat at my desk, watching the city lights stretch into the horizon, I felt a sense of closure. The reckoning was over, and the Sullivan legacy had not only endured, but emerged stronger than ever. My enemies had tried to destroy me, but all they had done was forge my resolve. The future was mine to shape, and I intended to make the most of it. 1 year after the reckoning, the dust had long settled. My enemies were reduced to mere footnotes, shadows of their former selves, while Nova Technologies stood as a towering testament to resilience and precision. The company had grown beyond even my expectations, an unshakable force built on the lessons of betrayal and the triumph of loyalty. The corporate headquarters gleamed in the San Francisco skyline, its glass facade reflecting a city that had witnessed my rise and my enemy's downfall. Inside, the Sullivan name resonated with innovation and integrity, reclaimed from the ashes of conspiracy. Mandy, Bill, Brooke, and Chris, my closest allies, had all risen to positions of power, ensuring that the legacy we'd rebuilt would endure for generations. Mandy, now 24, led the cybersecurity division with unparalleled brilliance. Her department was the industry standard, her protocols shaping the future of digital security. Watching her work reminded me of what was truly at stake when Patricia and her allies had tried to destroy us. Mandy wasn't just thriving, she was a symbol of everything they had failed to take from me. Bill had grown into a formidable corporate attorney, his insights honed by the intricate legal battles of the past years. His strategic mind and unwavering dedication ensured that Nova Technologies remained impervious to external threats. His recent marriage to the daughter of a Supreme Court justice added yet another layer of strength to the Sullivan legacy. Brooke, now the company's CEO, carried the torch with grace and authority. Her leadership was a seamless blend of efficiency and vision, qualities she had honed during years of loyal service. Under her guidance, Nova Technologies had achieved record-breaking growth, and the board of directors couldn't have been more supportive. Chris, ever the silent sentinel, expanded his role into global security operations. His vigilance extended beyond the company, ensuring that my family's safety was never compromised again. He operated with the same unflinching dedication that had made him my most trusted ally. Patricia's story, meanwhile, had become a cautionary tale. Her once glamorous life was now confined to a small apartment above a Chinese restaurant. She worked as a retail clerk, her days spent folding clothes and managing inventory under the fluorescent lights of a department store. Her attempts to rekindle her former connections were met with cold indifference. Her name was spoken only in hushed tones, her betrayal a warning to anyone who might consider crossing the Sullivan family. Twice a month, she was granted supervised visits with Thomas, but the boy had grown distant. Under Ronnie's care, Thomas thrived, surrounded by stability and love, the very things Patricia had failed to provide. Herman's fate was no better. His prison sentence ensured that he would never again step foot in a boardroom. The man who once moved millions with a phone call now lived in a small cell, his arrogance stripped away. His appeals were denied, and his reputation remained irreparably tarnished. Guillermo's life had shrunk to the size of a security guard's uniform and a series of night shifts at a strip mall. The man who once envisioned groundbreaking technology now walked empty corridors, his regrets echoing louder than the sound of his footsteps. His wife and children were gone, his wealth a distant memory. Sandy's descent was slower, but just as complete. Blacklisted from the industry, she lived a life of obscurity, her stolen patents reclaimed, and her name associated with failure. She moved from one rundown apartment to the next, a ghost of the ambitious woman she once was. Jared Norton, the mastermind of their grand scheme, faced multiple indictments and a seemingly endless series of court appearances. His immunity deal, revoked after my team exposed his hidden records, left him vulnerable to every charge the federal government could throw at him. His empire was dismantled, his influence reduced to nothing. The red dress remained in my office, framed behind bulletproof glass. It had become a symbol within the company, a story passed among employees as a reminder of what happens when loyalty is betrayed. New hires learned to treat it with reverence, not out of fear, but as a lesson in the power of resilience and justice. My new wife, Amanda Troy, had become an integral part of my life and the company. Her financial expertise had been instrumental in exposing the conspirators' hidden accounts, and her understanding of loss gave her a unique perspective on what we had overcome. Together, we built a blended family rooted in trust and strength. Amanda's daughters, now teenagers, thrived under Mandy's mentorship. Mandy, who had once been a victim of Patricia's manipulations, now took pride in guiding her younger stepsisters. Thomas, though not officially part of the Sullivan family, benefited from the trust fund I had established. Ronnie ensured he had the opportunities he deserved, and I maintained a careful, distant mentorship. As Nova Technologies grew, so did its impact. The company absorbed key markets from competitors, solidified its global presence, and continued to innovate. Under Brooks' leadership, stock values tripled, and the company's name became synonymous with excellence. My legacy wasn't just about wealth or power. It was about building something untouchable. Every success was a stone in the foundation of a future my enemies could never taint. They had tried to destroy me, but their betrayal had only made me stronger. The conspirators remained under discreet surveillance, not out of obsession, but as a matter of principle. Their continued struggles served as reminders of the choices they had made. Patricia's attempts to rebuild her life met with constant failure. Guillermo's financial missteps left him perpetually on the edge of poverty. Sandy's attempts to re-enter the industry were met with closed doors, her name a permanent mark against her. Herman's prison sentence stretched on, each day a reminder of his downfall. Jared's legal battles consumed what little remained of his resources and resolve. Karma, I had learned, wasn't swift lightning. It was the slow, inevitable tide that rose to drown those who mistook patience for weakness. In the end, the Sullivan name stood as a beacon of integrity and resilience. My enemies were reduced to cautionary tales, their fates a testament to the consequences of betrayal. My family thrived, my company flourished, and my legacy was secure. As I stood in my office, watching the sun set over the city, I glanced at the photo of Patricia in her red dress from that fateful gala. It was a reminder of the night she thought she had won. Beside it, the latest quarterly reports showed Nova Technologies' record-breaking growth. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't just destroying my enemies. It was building something they could never touch, never comprehend, and never destroy. Justice had been served, cold and complete, and I had no regrets. The Sullivan name would endure for generations, a legacy of strength, loyalty, and absolute justice. Here's the next story. Michelle had always been seen as a beautiful woman, but she did not pay as much attention to her beauty as many of her acquaintances did. She was previously blonde, but one day she saw a few gray hairs in her hair. This was a gentle reminder to her that as the years passed, she opted to visit her stylist to try something new and different. After a lengthy consultation with a stylist, she colored her hair bright white and trimmed it into a trendy haircut. This new image gave her an appearance that was modern, sophisticated, and audacious. Harry, her husband, was thrilled. He couldn't help but observe how Michelle's change made her even more attractive to him. She became a symbol of both maturity and beauty. Michelle recently marked her 49th birthday. Her height of 107 centimeters and slim form made her stand out in any society. Although she had never considered herself a model, her attractiveness was unique. It united confidence, classicism, and a subtle magnetic pull. She loved a basic type of dress that highlighted her innate beauty. She was most commonly seen wearing tight pencil skirts and mid-heeled shoes. This dress accentuated her physique, which remained tiny despite her age. However, she had one characteristic that was tough to overlook: her breasts. Her curves had shifted slightly over time, and part of the weight gain appeared to be focused there. Even loose tops couldn't conceal this trait. Men often paid attention to Michelle, but she handled it with respect. Gently, yet firmly refused persistent admirers. She and Harry had been married for nearly 25 years, and the impending occasion brought them both mixed emotions. Their marriage has always been solid, full of love and respect. They did, however, have hardships, as any long-term partnership must. One of Harry's problems was their sexual relationship. He couldn't help but notice how she had slowed. Michelle persisted on being happy with everything, but Harry couldn't shake the impression that she wasn't. He thought about it frequently, sometimes excessively. His anxieties were exacerbated by stories he read of untimely marriage breakup, infidelity, and concealed complaints. The possibility that Michelle would meet another guy plagued him, especially since she always drew the attention of the opposing sex. Harry was a man who was used to solving difficulties rather than using them up. However, he didn't know how to handle the situation without offending Michelle's feelings. He didn't want to appear envious or insecure despite his internal worries. He knew their relationship was built on trust and love, but his fear occasionally blurred his reasoning. Harry attempted to tell himself that he was overthinking everything and that he should just talk to Michelle. However, he refrained from doing so for fear of being misconstrued. Michelle, in turn, saw fluctuations in Harry's mood. Her instincts told her that something was hurting her spouse, but he did not express his feelings. She wished he would open up, but she was hesitant to insist. I do not want to turn the matter into a conflict. She adored Harry and was devoted to him, but she also had reservations. She worried whether she had disappointed him in some manner, particularly when it came to intimacy in their youth. Their connection was passionate and filled with emotion, but throughout time, a lot has changed. Michelle didn't see it as a problem, but rather as a normal part of their relationship. As the anniversary approached, Michelle wanted to surprise Harry. She started arranging an evening to remind them of the beginning of their love. She wanted this gathering to be more than just a celebration of their love. It was also an opportunity to rekindle a connection that had faded slightly under the weight of daily worries. She saw that their marriage was more than just a habit. It was also a work that required effort from both parties, and while she wasn't aware of Harry's thinking, she believed that such an evening could be something memorable for both of them. Harry was desperate to locate the ideal gift for Michelle. This gift had to be both beautiful and distinctive, expressing all of his love and appreciation for the 25 years they had spent together. For Harry, Michelle was not only his wife, but also his guiding light, inspiration, and significance in life. He was terrified to think what his life would be like without her. Her upbeat demeanor, never-ending stream of ideas, and contagious laughter infused their home with warmth and joy. Together, they worked better together than they did separately. Her enthusiasm and ingenuity complemented his tranquility and prudence, yet finding a present proved difficult. Harry considered his options for days, weighing the advantages and disadvantages. A vacation in an exotic destination would allow them to feel young and carefree again, or a diamond ring, a symbol of their eternal love. Each of these alternatives felt worthwhile to him, but none of them appeared distinctive enough to adequately express his emotions. They were at a neighbor's cookout, celebrating the first truly warm day of spring. Harry discussed his thoughts with Oliver. Oliver, the son of an old college acquaintance, was a smart and eager young man beginning his scientific career. Oliver's father, Tom, acknowledged to Harry many years ago that, despite his son's brilliant brains, he is introverted and socially awkward. Harry remembered the talk like it had happened yesterday. Inspired by Tom's honesty, he offered to assist Oliver by arranging for a research internship at his company and allowing the young man to save on accommodation. Harry let him live in a little extension adjacent to their garage. In exchange, Oliver offered to assist renovate the house, which proved to be a win-win situation for everyone involved. Since then, he and Oliver had frequent conversations over coffee or at social occasions, as they do still. Oliver had already transformed. He became more self-assured, and his timidity gave place to calm confidence. Harry even began to consider him a member of the family, now standing at the grill, watching Oliver carefully turn the steaks. Harry decided to ask for advice. "You're young, Oliver. Tell me, what would you offer a girl to indicate how important she is to you? I'd like to give Michelle an anniversary gift. You understand what she means to me." Oliver gave Harry a meaningful look. His eyes glittered with interest, as if an idea was already building in his mind. "Well, Mr. Harry," he started smiling, "if you want something exceptional, consider making it yourself. Not just buy, but also invest your soul. Perhaps it will be relevant to your recollections. For example, create an album with images and notes about your most memorable occasions. Or could you build something like a tiny garden or greenhouse, a place where you may spend time together and reflect on all of your pleasant memories?" Harry paused to contemplate Oliver's words. It was an unexpected yet remarkably correct proposal. He remembered Michelle's fantasy of having a small nook where she could care for plants and read her favorite books. Perhaps this was just what he needed, a gift that not only represented their love, but also made her happy every day. Oliver blurted out before he could stop himself. "Oh, God, who is this? She's simply fantastic." Harry, who was seated beside him, jotting something on his notepad, looked up, expecting to see who he was referring to. His attention shifted to the side, instinctively looking for a young woman, either someone's companion or a chance passerby. Instead, he fixed his focus on a woman who entered the room with cups of tea on a tray. It was Michelle, his wife. For a time, Harry was perplexed. He didn't immediately comprehend what Oliver meant until he added without moving his gaze away from her. "She's the ideal woman, very stylish, and her figure is fantastic." Oliver's remarks finally penetrated through the fog of confusion, and Harry recognized that his young colleague was eagerly talking. It was an unusual moment. Unusual, even absurd, but with a grain of truth. "This young man is my wife," Harry stated firmly, concealing a mix of astonishment, little resentment, and pride. Oliver flushed pale and shrank from embarrassment. His shoulders slumped. His gaze shifted to the table, and his cheeks reddened, as if he had just experienced the worst social shame of his life. "I'm extremely sorry, Harry," he muttered quickly. "I had no idea that she was your wife. Sometimes I am just a complete moron. My mouth moves faster than my intellect. There was a brief pause in the air. Harry sighed. This scene made him feel strangely funny. Oliver, the young and impetuous one, was always like this, without any filters. With true excitement in what he observed, it was both unpleasant and touching. And his honest, almost infantile apologies removed any remaining animosity. "It's fine," Harry finally murmured, leaning against the chair and smiling unexpectedly and warmly. "You're correct. She's just great." He took a minute to gaze away to Michelle, who was carefully placing cups of tea on a tray. "Would you like to meet her? After all, you must live next to us and work on the house." Oliver looked up, seemingly surprised by the reaction. "Are you truly not angry?" he asked in disbelief. Harry said, "I'm not angry." His voice softened. To be honest, I had stopped noticing how lovely she was. "Looks like I need to fix this." Oliver grinned, still embarrassed but more confident, and Harry, thinking, gazed at his wife with a new emotion. Her typical movements, sweet grin, and relaxed posture suddenly appeared to him as if he had not seen them in a long time. Or maybe he wasn't paying attention. He couldn't help but observe Harry introducing them to each other, avoiding any reference of his recent remarks that would have upset Oliver. Despite this, Oliver still felt tense. Although he appreciated Harry's diplomacy, Michelle's warm demeanor put him at ease right away. She started asking about family, career, and studies. All of this appeared really intriguing to her, and her warmth was appealing. Despite the simple start to the chat, Oliver's face soon flushed crimson from the ears. He knew his shame was too obvious and attempted to concentrate on her inquiries. When Harry took a little break to meet with other friends, Michelle continued to talk, asking questions and interjecting her own brilliant comments. Oliver listened to her, but he also saw that his focus was becoming increasingly distracted. He tried to concentrate, but it was unbearably impossible. His gaze moved down to her chest several times. It was dumb and inappropriate. He couldn't help but notice her stunning figure. All he could do was blame himself for his failure to behave appropriately. So, just as his thoughts had fully gone astray, her abrupt and shockingly direct inquiry jolted him back to reality. "Do you enjoy the view?" Oliver flinched, as if he had been caught doing something wrong. The face turned even more crimson, if that is even feasible. He began muttering nonsensical apologies. He felt entirely out of control of the situation. "I'm sorry. I didn't intend to." Michelle, however, interrupted him with a smile that mingled cunning and goodwill. "Try to keep your gaze above the neckline, please. To be honest, you'll never find a female if you stare at every woman the same way." Oliver began to deny in desperation. "I don't stare at all women. It isn't like that. I mean, only you. You're gorgeous." He paused, realizing he was digging himself a deeper and deeper hole. He sighed, giving up. "Sorry. I should probably quit digging, right?" Michelle laughed gently and sincerely, but with a hint of perky slyness. "In such cases, this is typically the best option. But you know you made it out. He said I was gorgeous. No lady grows tired of hearing this." Oliver was relieved to learn that she was not upset by his actions, and instead found it amusing. Her kindness and ease of communicating allowed him to relax. Following that, their conversation got more comfortable. Michelle, despite this minor incident, believed Oliver was a charming young man. Shy, yes. However, there was a charming honesty to it. He turned out to be both funny and engaging in his own unique manner. He was also attractive, albeit a little uncomfortable, with a mop of wild, dark hair that seemed to have its own life. Oliver also did his best. He almost succeeded in keeping his sight fixed on her face rather than below. However, he was aware that this would be difficult for him. He's always been slightly infatuated with breasts. Not pathologically, of course, but enough to make him lose his mind. Sometimes. And there was no doubt that Michelle has real, impressive breasts. The following week, Oliver started his internship. He studied and prepared his own meals in the evenings. He didn't want to add to Harry and Michelle's already heavy load. Over the weekend, he eagerly completed a list of repairs. Michelle was concerned that he didn't have a personal life and insisted that he only work a few hours each morning. There was no rush. Michelle was planning to go out for brunch with her friends one Saturday morning, but she wasn't sure if her beautiful vintage sheath dress would fit her. When she saw Oliver in the garden, she asked him how she looked. "You look great in any clothing?" There was quiet. Michelle paused in her tracks and stared at him. Oliver reddened, urgently trying to think of something to make his remark appear less direct. Michelle felt humiliated. She should not have asked him that. "That's fantastic to hear." "Thank you. And I thought you found it difficult to flirt with ladies. But here you made such a confident compliment." Oliver felt relieved. The tension was gone. "Thank you. It's easy for you. I'm only telling the truth. My words become jumbled when I'm with other folks. I'm thinking about something. Begin worrying about whether I like it. Try to think of an alternative, and by the time I say something rational, they've generally left. You must tell the truth and not get carried away. Trust yourself. You are a good guy." Michelle exited with a smile on her face, in an unusually pleasant mood and little embarrassed. "Are you serious? Do you want me to tease a guy half my age?" Michelle giggled and shook her head. Harry grinned, his expression becoming more mischievous. "I am not saying leap on his neck. It's simply a way to uplift your mood. Sometimes a little innocent flirtation is enough to boost a person's confidence. And you? You can use your charm if you wish." Michelle leaned closer, appraised Harry, and narrowed her eyes. "Are you certain you aren't jealous?" "Jealousy?" Harry smiled even broader. "I'm sure we both realize this is simply a game." Michelle pretended to be thoughtful, but a light shone in her eyes. "Harry, you know all too well how such games are played. This makes me think. Oh, what are your thoughts? Why did you come up with all of this?" "To put me to the test," she said with a fake seriousness. She shook her finger in his direction. "Make sure you're not jealous of yourself." Harry laughed and raised his hands as a sign of innocence. "Okay, I understand. You won. But I'm confident that if you choose to tease him a little, it will be the highlight of his life." Michelle smiled but did not respond. She was thinking less about giving Oliver a gift and more about the bizarre duality of the situation, how easily Harry could manipulate her and push her to such ideas while keeping his good-natured charm. Michelle felt weird, but also interested. She sat in front of the mirror, scrutinizing herself in the new undergarments Harry had encouraged her to try on. This bra has already led her to have mixed emotions on multiple occasions. On the one hand, it appeared extremely luxury and accentuated her shape in ways that no other did. Michelle, on the other hand, couldn't help but believe it was too daring and provocative, but Harry seemed to be overjoyed, repeatedly remarking on how beautiful she looked. She observed that this bra drew the attention of males, whether on a walk in a cafe or just at work. She attracted everyone's attention. Of course, it pleased her little, but it also made her think. "I'm not sure," she muttered to herself, adjusting the strap. "It doesn't feel right, but perhaps Harry is correct, and there's nothing wrong with it." "I will think about it." Harry first advised that she attempt this style. Michelle was shocked that he rarely articulated such radical views, despite the fact that he often advised her to experiment with outfits more. Perhaps he was trying to spice up their relationship, particularly in the bedroom. The concept was clearly out of the ordinary, but it piqued her interest. She could have found it a bit exciting. After all, it was something new outside of the norm. However, it did not cross the line of decency, just a brief flirting with the outside world, which ultimately provided her pleasure. It is Saturday. Michelle spent a long time deciding what to wear to match this bra. After great deliberation, she chose a silk blouse that delicately caressed her form and let the bra shine, A tight pencil skirt and high-heeled heels rounded out the ensemble. She stood in front of the mirror, feeling a little nervous. This was a move ahead, a step into something new for her, and she had no idea how others would react to it. But since Harry encourages her to experiment, why not try it? Harry was astounded when he saw her. He was nearly speechless. His gaze immediately focused on her chest, which swayed with each stride she took. This bra made a statement with its delicate silk fabric. "Look, you look fantastic." It was all he could say. Michelle continued to look at her with excitement, startled by his reaction. Her confidence grew by the second. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly appealing and desirable. Her bravery was rewarded not just with Harry's attention, but also with a hint of pride in herself. "I didn't expect it to have such an effect." She smiled as she straightened her hair. In the evening, they attended a party with friends. The environment was easygoing, and Michelle immediately adjusted to her new look. She saw that not only Harry, but also other males were casting eyes at her. One of them, Oliver, definitely likes her appearance, despite his Herculean efforts to avoid being too evident. This boosted her confidence. Michelle knew that all of this stayed within the scope of casual flirtation, which made her feel even more liberated. By the end of the evening, Michelle had completely relaxed. She smiled, talked, appreciated Harry's attention, and felt wonderful. This day became a sort of revelation for her. She discovered that sometimes it's worth going above and beyond to find something new about yourself. And the most important point is that such experiments not only make people happy, but also make you feel special. Michelle believed Oliver needed some time to recover, so she didn't rush him. She gave him a time to regain his breath and gain confidence before noting that the tension between them had subsided. She advised taking a brief rest. Her voice sounded calm and comfortable, which was appealing. She remarked that it would be wonderful to have something to drink, such as coffee or tea. This proposition sounded so natural that Oliver almost instantly accepted, and they were soon seated at the table, speaking freely. Their chat turned out to be very simple and casual. Oliver, who is often reticent, stated that it might be tough for him to communicate with others, particularly girls. He admitted that he is really bashful at times, and that approaching a girl makes him feel awkward and insecure. Michelle listened to him with genuine interest, nodding at appropriate intervals. She smiled, hoping to cheer him up, and began to give him advice. Her recommendations were basic, yet effective. She said that the most essential thing is to be yourself, not pretend to be someone else, and to allow your remarks sound genuine and natural. Her advice was encouraging, and Oliver listened intently, taking in every word. Meanwhile, construction on the front of the house was moving nicely. Oliver, it turned out, was a highly talented craftsman, and his efforts yielded apparent benefits every time he took a break. Michelle tried to keep him company so he felt more at ease. He grew to love her company more. Her classic beauty and elegance, exquisite but subtle, literally caught the attention. When Michelle turned away, Oliver allowed himself to gaze at her for a little longer, enjoying her grace. These times appeared nearly miraculous to him, although he couldn't explain why. Meanwhile, Harry, Michelle's husband, couldn't help but observe the shift in the relationship between his wife and Oliver. It was nearly tangible. He initially believed that their communication was limited to friendship, but something in their chemistry began to shift with time. Harry had a peculiar combination of feelings. He knew that his love for Michelle remained intact, but witnessing another man gaze at his wife with such admiration was rare for him. He began to watch Oliver finding more ways to stay close to Michelle, and she didn't appear to know how close they had grown. Oliver, for his part, could not stop thinking about Michelle. She was more than simply a friend for him. Her warmth, friendliness, and listening skills made him feel as if she understood him better than anybody else. He gradually began to open up to her about his experiences, trusting her with his most sensitive ideas. He latched on her every word, as if it were priceless. He still couldn't find the perfect word to describe his emotions, but he knew deep down that they were falling in love. Oliver's confidence has clearly improved significantly, Harry replied thoughtfully, keeping a tight eye on Michelle. She grinned and her eyes sparkled slightly. Yes, he's just great, she answered with real enthusiasm before her voice quieted slightly. It's unfortunate that he didn't find it out sooner. He missed so much. Michelle paused, peered around to see if anyone was listening, and then leaned closer to Harry. He revealed a secret to me, she whispered, as if the things she was about to say were too delicate for a regular voice. Harry raised an eyebrow, inviting her to continue. He's never had a significant girlfriend. She eventually spoke, her voice cracking with sadness. I feel so badly for him given his age. This is completely incorrect. Harry blinked with amazement. This is a surprise. Yes, this shyness bothered him. Michelle continued to frown. And it has now become a significant barrier. He's very nervous. He sometimes appears to be looking through thick glass. Afraid about breaking it? Harry nodded and looked at her with interest. Well, he has no difficulty adoring you and conversing with you. Michelle inclined her head slightly, as if considering his comments. I believe it's because I'm older. It is safer for him. Harry squinted his eyes skeptically. Nonsense. You are a very gorgeous woman who excels at creating a welcoming environment for others. Although he paused for a second before continuing with a cheeky smile, I observed you were still flirting with him. Would you enjoy this? Attention. Michelle thought for a moment. A shadow of doubt emerged on her face. She leaned her elbows on the table and gazed off into the distance. I suppose there's something in it, she said quietly. He's cute, and I enjoy his company. She smiled gently, attempting to conceal her minor embarrassment. It's flattering when a young man describes me as attractive. I also really love our talks. Harry was closely studying her when she abruptly stated, Actually, I have a request. He grew wary. Which? Would you mind if I went out to dinner with him? She spoke fast, as if frightened she'd alter her mind. Harry scowled and raised his eyebrows in astonishment. Seriously? He asked again. So he may practice dating? She added hurriedly. I'd show him how to act at dinner and with cocktails. I don't suppose he has much experience with this. And she stopped for a bit. I really want to help him find and maintain a girl. Harry remained mute, his gaze searching for more in her eyes. Michelle narrowed her gaze, seeing his skepticism. Harry, if it makes you uncomfortable, I will not go. It means nothing. He breathed slowly. Do you comprehend how passionate he is about you? Perhaps a little in love? Michelle rolled her eyes, attempting to dismiss his words, but her palms curled dangerously into fists. Come on. It's simply a harmless flirtation. To overcome his fear of women, he must learn to communicate with them. Harry was still apprehensive, but his expression softened. I believe it can be done, but not here so you don't have to justify your philanthropic cause. She grinned and blushed slightly. Thank you, Harry. You truly are the greatest. Harry only shook his head, seeing her eyes return to a contemplative expression. Harry thought Michelle was trying too hard and looked too wonderful for this date in her tight, shimmering turquoise dress. She was glancing at her reflection in the mirror when she realized Harry was observing her. It isn't too late to cancel everything. No, I need to go. We won't take long. She collected her bag, kissed his face, and clasped his hand before walking out to Oliver's car. Harry felt apprehensive as he watched Oliver help her into the car. They had a wonderful time during supper. Oliver carefully selected discussion topics, listened intently to Michelle, and asked questions that not only demonstrated his genuine interest, but also made her grin. Every move and statement he made demonstrated attention and respect, which was not lost on anyone. Michelle, who was not accustomed to this amount of attention, was pleasantly pleased by how easy and relaxed the conversation was. It appeared like they had known each other for many years. She even admitted to herself that Oliver acted like a true gentleman, which did not happen very frequently in her life. After dinner, Oliver suggested they go to a nice bar nearby. The environment there was peaceful and comfortable. Dim lighting, soft music, and a low buzz of discussion provided a cozy atmosphere at a table in the corner away from other diners. They continued their talk. Oliver smiled as he casually mentioned that his firm had made the occasion special. His attention remained on Michelle for a bit longer than normal, and she noted that he lowered his eyes slightly in embarrassment. Suddenly, he stretched out and lightly caressed her palm. His fingertips were warm, and Michelle felt a shiver run through her body. She looked up to meet his eyes. At that time, she noticed how brilliantly his emerald eyes sparkled under the bar's soft lighting. It was the same sight that made your heart race. She felt her cheeks heat up and attempted to draw her hand away, but something inside her stopped her. They froze, and the distance between them appeared to narrow to a minimum. Their faces became closer, and it appeared that a kiss was about to occur. But at that moment, the sound of shattered glass boomed through the bar, making both of them flinch. Michelle swiftly removed her hand, as if the sound had returned her to reality. She grinned, attempting to lighten the mood. If this were a genuine date, this would be the ideal time to take such a step. She spoke quietly, trying to seem casual as possible. Oliver nodded slightly, but the look of disappointment in his eyes made Michelle's heart shake. She knew his reaction was entirely warranted, but she couldn't understand why she had interrupted this moment. They remained more reserved throughout the evening. The discussion was still light, but there was a slight uneasiness about it. Michelle could feel Oliver's thoughts racing through his mind, but she didn't dare to discuss what had occurred. When they got home, Oliver, like a perfect gentleman, led her to the car. They sat inside for a bit longer, conversing and sharing jokes that no longer seemed humorous. Michelle felt an odd combination of thanks for the evening and concern about their relationship. Finally, she ended the long stillness. "Thank you for the evening, Oliver. It was quite nice." He nodded, but his eyes remained tense. Finally, he chose to speak now. If this were a date with a girl, maybe it was time to take it a step further, he said, attempting to seem amused but with a note of doubt in his voice. Michelle grinned at him but noted how he was trying to mask his concern. She chose to continue the chat. "And you're worried she won't want to, or worse, accuse you of harassment?" Oliver smiled hesitantly. "You know, today is like walking through a minefield. You never know how others will perceive your behavior. What if she doesn't state it clearly? What if I get it completely wrong?" Michelle gave him a kind gaze. She understood his worries and how tough it was for him to be secure in his actions right now, especially when it came to expressing his emotions. She replied thoughtfully, "And I believe she can simply let you know if something is amiss. The most important thing is to show politeness and respect. For example, when in doubt, begin with a gentle kiss on the cheek. This is always a safe option, and if something goes wrong, simply apologize and demonstrate that you accept her decision. Sometimes you have to be brave, even if it looks risky." He relaxed his face and gave a little smile. "Thank you, Michelle. You always know how to diffuse a situation." She smiled back, and a brief period of silence fell between them. However, she was not as awkward as she had been previously. Oliver had little time to say or do anything before his instincts took control. He cautiously leaned in and kissed Michelle on the lips. He kissed her with uncertainty and nervousness, as if he was terrified of her reaction, but he wanted it so badly that he couldn't stop. Michelle froze in astonishment as she felt his lips touch hers. It was entirely unexpected. She never imagined Oliver would take such a risk, especially so abruptly. Her first inclination was to back away, but something about his motion stopped her. Perhaps it was his sincerity, or the desperate courage with which he chose to commit such an act. She did not instantly return Oliver's kiss, and when he sensed her uncertainty, he abruptly drew away. His face flushed, and his eyes widened with dread and shame as he stared at her, and then away. "I am sorry, he began but faltered, perhaps looking for words. "You said courage, and I've wanted to do this for a long time." He nervously adjusted the collar of his shirt, his eyes shifting between her face and his hands. Michelle watched him calmly, attempting to control her feelings. She watched him straining to keep his cool. However, his anxiety was evident by little motions, quivering of his hands and tense tapping of his fingers on his legs. "Oliver," she eventually said, trying to sound soft, "everything's fine." Nothing awful occurred. Her remarks were earnest, but she realized they were of little use. Oliver obviously felt out of place. He took a big breath and attempted to grin, but it came out weak and unnatural. "It's my fault," Michelle explained, attempting to alleviate his shame. "I was flirting with you, and we are actually on a date. This is understandable to a certain extent." However, her words of comfort did not ease the situation. Oliver got increasingly concerned, as if he was haunted by the fear of ruining everything. He fidgeted in his seat, apparently thinking about how to apologize or make amends. Michelle knew that the situation demanded decisive action. She couldn't let him suffer because of this. She stepped ahead without hesitation, both physically and metaphorically. She leaned in, took his face in her hands, and kissed him again, this time with softness and confidence. This time, however, things were different. Their lips connected without the awkwardness they had previously. It was an unmistakable kiss. Oliver relaxed and allowed himself to simply enjoy the moment. He timidly raised his hand, apparently intending to touch her, but unsure how. As his hand approached her breast, Michelle gently stopped him. "Oliver," she muttered, barely breaking away. "Everything's fine. Simply relax." She took his hand and softly rested it on her shoulder. "Start here," she said, attempting to seem assured. "Slowly lower your hand. Always ensure that your companion is comfortable." She guided his movement till his palm rested on her chest. That's all she said, smiling tentatively at first, then more boldly. His hands became more assured, and she noticed him smiling with increased confidence. "Oh God, this is wonderful," he exclaimed unexpectedly, unable to contain his feelings. His remarks caused Michelle to freeze. This reply was so genuine that she couldn't help but chuckle, but her laughter immediately turned to realization. "Stop!" She drew away quickly, as if she remembered something vital. "Sorry, Oliver, we should not do this." She looked away. Her face flushed from embarrassment and mental battle. "I'm married, for God's sake." She grabbed her bag and hurriedly exited the car, not looking at Oliver. Her heart was racing as she walked quickly home. When she arrived at the flat, a new flood of emotions overcame her. Harry hadn't yet returned, so she had time to gather her breath and digest what had transpired. Moron, moron. She paced around the room, whispering. Her mind jumped from one subject to another. She remembered how it all started. He remembered his tentative first kiss, his yearning and his embarrassment. It all seemed strange and incorrect, but yet quite exhilarating. "What am I doing?" She spoke out loud, stopping at the window. She peered outside, where light snow coated the ground like a white blanket. She thought about Harry, about his generosity, his concern, and how he always tried for her. "I have the greatest husband in the world, and I do this to him," she whispered as her eyes welled up with tears. She knew it had to end. She must tell Harry everything. She must seek his pardon and hope that he understands her. The evening was coming to an end. The exhaustion of the day appeared to descend on them both, but the peaceful silence was abruptly broken by a question that hung in the air like a heavy weight. "How was your night?" Only 4 words, but their significance to Michelle was enormous. As soon as she heard this simple inquiry, her heart began to race, and cold sweat formed around her temples. The words became trapped in her throat before she could react. Tears instantly streamed from her eyes. At that point, it appeared as if the entire planet had crumbled. Harry, as always attentive and compassionate, arrived immediately. His arms reflexively went out to hug and soothe her, but Michelle, trembling, pushed him away. This movement was unexpected, almost desperate. "Forgive me, Harry." Her voice was hardly heard, interrupted by weeping. "I made a horrible mistake today. We kissed. I mean, me and Oliver. I'm so sorry." The words finally escaped her lips, leaving behind a sad sense of emptiness. She pressed her eyes shut, expecting an eruption of rage, scathing words, or perhaps an accusation. But none of this happened. Harry remained mute, his expression more bewildered than angry. Michelle found this period of quiet extremely intolerable. "How far has it gone?" he finally inquired, attempting to appear calm, though his voice revealed a hint of strain. Her response was like an avalanche. A confession erupted in a rush of words that she had been fighting to suppress all evening. "We kissed, and I allowed him to touch my breasts," she whispered. She almost lost her voice in shame. Harry examined her closely. His countenance was practically impassive, but a shadow of something unfathomable appeared in his eyes. He hesitated, attempting to absorb what he had heard. "Did you allow him? Didn't he force you?" he clarified. His voice was quiet, yet there was a hidden depth about it. "Not at all." Michelle hastened to reassure him. "It was entirely my fault. I knew he liked me, and I should have halted everything immediately." Harry paused for a minute, as if attempting to fit all of the parts of a puzzle into a whole. "Did you want to take this further?" he asked cautiously. "He's quite beautiful." Michelle shook her head, her eyes welling up with tears again. "No, I'm very sorry. I'm not sure what came over me. He was so confused, and all I wanted to do was help him," she explained, though she wasn't sure why she did it. The conversation lasted until late at night, like a broken cup. They sought to piece together every aspect of their connection, discussing even the slightest things. Michelle said everything truthfully, not omitting a single nuance. Her voice seemed genuine, but it did not alleviate Harry's concerns. He felt curiously disconnected, as if he were observing everything from the outside. His mind rejected his emotions. Harry understood why things happened as they did. He was aware that Michelle was sensitive and kind, which occasionally led her to make rash decisions. He could see that a kiss in some circumstances may appear to be an act of support for her, but the fact that she allowed Oliver to touch her went beyond easy explanation. This made him wonder. Perhaps she was seeking for something greater. Memories from the past surfaced in his head. Old fears, which he thought were long forgotten, resurfaced with newfound strength. What if Michelle truly wants to leave him, or even cheat on him? These thoughts slithered through his mind like deadly snakes, destroying every ounce of faith. But he said nothing. Instead, Harry listened intently, delving into her countenance, looking for answers to his queries. They talked till they were both exhausted and barely touched their pillows. They went asleep, fatigued, but not quite reconciled. The next morning, they had to determine how to continue living with this weight. But now, at this silent hour of the night, all that remained was the struggle with their own thoughts and the hope that love would triumph over the suffering. Michelle felt guilty. She could defend some of her actions, but not all of them. It was an unusual setting, yet she could not shake a peculiar sense. She realized, horrified, that it was exhilaration. Harry and Michelle had been planning for their anniversary for a few days now. They joyfully discussed the dinner they were preparing to organize, reminisced about important times in their lives together, and shopped for the ideal gift for each other. Harry appeared to be particularly thoughtful, But Michelle attributed this to his tendency to overemphasize key occurrences. As they sat together in the comfortable living room with only a few hours until the anniversary, Harry broke the silence. "Our 25th anniversary is approaching," he said, his voice confident. However, there was something strange about it. "Michelle, you've been the perfect wife all these years. I've frequently considered what would be the nicest gift I could give you. To be honest, I considered this for a long time. In the end, I had two possibilities." Michelle bent her head slightly, smiled, and set down the book she was reading. "You always managed to pique Harry's interest." "So, what are these options?" she asked with real interest. Harry hesitated for a time as if gathering courage. Then he took a long breath before continuing. "The first choice is to get a diamond eternity ring. Something to remind you of my love for you until the rest of our lives." Michelle's eyes glittered slightly, but she didn't interrupt her husband. She knew he hadn't finished yet. "The second person," said Harry. There was a small tremble in his voice. "The second is allowing you to spend the night with Oliver." Michelle raised her head, her eyes wide with shock. "Oh, God! Are you serious?" She appeared stunned. "Harry, I cannot do this to you. Honestly. That night I made a huge mistake." Harry raised his hand to gently interrupt her. "I'm not joking," he added calmly, "and I don't think it was a mistake. You and he have grown extremely close, and I can see how drawn you are to each other. You're both holding back, and it feels like it's hurting you. If this is truly what you desire, I believe I can live with it. To be honest, you and I have both gotten more vibrant and enthusiastic since he entered our life. I feel like I'm losing some ground. I really don't want you to miss out on anything significant or feel unhappy." Michelle looked at him, puzzled. She clutched her hands tightly, as if to collect her thoughts. "I've never been dissatisfied," she explained, her voice broken but earnest. "And I'd never cheat on you. Harry, you know how much I love you." That is good." Harry interrupted her quietly. "If he doesn't pose a threat to us and I can trust you both, I might be able to handle this. I believe that sometimes you have to go through it in order to better understand oneself." Michelle closed her eyes briefly, as if to comprehend what she had heard. She then glanced at him and smiled, but it was a sorrowful smile. "Harry, I can do without this," she remarked softly. "But I sincerely appreciate your offer. You are an incredible husband, and not many people can give such a gift." She stopped before immediately laughing. "Is this just a sly method to avoid purchasing me a diamond ring?" Harry smiled broadly, relieved by her reaction. "Yes, you've figured me out. Am I that transparent?" They both chuckled, and the tension in the room started to ease. Michelle came closer to him and rested her head on his shoulder. She said, "Thank you for caring so much about me." "But I only need you, Harry. Is it just you?" "Certainly. This is an expanded version of the text." She was hesitant at first. Following this chat, Michelle and Oliver got considerably closer. Their connection began to evolve in a completely different way than before. They started spending more time together, genuinely enjoying each other's company. They had many similar subjects to talk, ranging from job to life goals, but the most of their conversations revolved around Oliver's struggle to find a girl. Surprisingly, this topic brought them closer together. Oliver joked, and Michelle laughed, encouraging him. But deep down, she sensed there was more to these chats. The fact was that he had lost interest in other women after meeting Michelle. She became someone special to Oliver, someone with whom he could be himself. Every talk, smile, and time spent with her gave his life significance. Michelle's thoughts became increasingly preoccupied with Oliver. She began to realize how much she looked forward to seeing him again, how she found herself recalling their discussions and times when they laughed together. Her heart fell more and more with his sight, and her thoughts became increasingly contradictory. Harry and Michelle's anniversary party went exactly as planned. The house was filled with close friends and relatives celebrating their long and happy life together. The mood was full of happiness, laughter, and friendliness. The sounds of congratulations, cheerful discussions, and music could be heard everywhere. Guests enjoyed delicious food and drinks, and dancing was the night's highlight. Harry and Michelle smiled as they accepted congratulations and kind words from loved ones. During the celebration, they raised a toast and delivered moving speeches. Harry commented on how fortunate he was to meet Michelle and share a life of love and understanding with her. Michelle, in turn, recalled how their journey together was full of joy and support. Both underlined the importance of their loved ones assembled that evening, as well as the significance of their ongoing love for each other. As the evening progressed, the visitors began to leave, leaving a sense of ease and contentment after a wonderful time. Harry and Michelle reclined on the sofa, enjoying the calm after a raucous holiday. After a few glasses of champagne, Michelle felt the time had come for a serious chat. "Harry, may I ask you one question?" She began to hesitate a little. He stared at her with eyes full of understanding. "Of course." "Michelle, what happened?" She took a big breath and collected her thoughts. "Do you mind if I spend some time with Oliver?" Her voice was soft, just a whisper. Harry lifted an eyebrow as she hesitated. "Do not be evasive, Michelle. What specifically would you like to ask me?" he asked. I had a feeling there was more to her words. She stared at him, attempting to seem honest as possible. "So, I guess I want to ask if I can sleep with him. He still does not have a girlfriend, and I believe this could help him." She breathed, feeling the stress. Release. Harry paused for a bit before a faint smile appeared on his face. "So, this is for charity only for his benefit." He joked, attempting to defuse the situation. Michelle wrinkled her nose as she realized how that sounded. "To be honest, I actually like him. Very. I believe it would be an incredible experience for both of us to discuss something so personal." Her tone was honest and candid. Harry nodded, contemplating her remarks. "I understand and value your candor, Mitchell. Yes, my offer still stands. If a 25-year-old beauty approached me, I would find it impossible to say no." He grinned, causing her to relax. "I love you and want you to continue to embrace life and new experiences, no matter what they may be, as long as it is a one-time event and carried out with respect for all. I believe I can manage it. As I become older, I relax more because we only have one life." Michelle glanced at him with mixed emotions. "I'm not sure what to say or whether I want to do it, but Oliver and I are becoming closer, and this is becoming increasingly perilous," she said, lowering her gaze. Her voice faded, and the room became silent. Michelle informed Oliver that Harry was cool with them getting closer. He was astounded by the thought that this could happen. He was unconcerned by their age difference. He knew he loved her, which is why he didn't want to do anything to jeopardize her or her marriage. The next week, Michelle gently informed Harry that Oliver planned to ask her out on Friday. The connotation was plain. Oliver was taken aback when he and Michelle entered the restaurant that evening. He knew his partner was gorgeous, but it felt like he was seeing her for the first time. Her evening gown was definitely a work of art, a deep, dark burgundy color that seemed to run down the curves of her body. The fabric itself was fragile, thin, and slightly glittering in the twilight of the hall, where the soft light of candles was hardly visible. The dress hugged the shape of her hips, emphasizing their smooth roundness. Even though these forms have broadened slightly over time, Michelle remained very peaceful. Her shape preserved pleasing proportions, and the delicate roundness of her buttocks, accentuated by her heels, gave her a unique sensuality. These exquisite shoes with thin straps lifted her off the ground, giving her posture a distinct pride and lightness. Oliver, standing nearby, felt his jaw drop in disbelief. He couldn't find the words and couldn't contain his awe. His eyes twinkled with excitement, and something deliciously ached in his chest. Michelle couldn't help but smile knowingly at Oliver's reaction, gently instructing him to shut his lips. Her voice sounded calm and scornful, yet it also conveyed a warm, feminine pride. She was happy to capture such an admiring look at herself. Although the dinner and wine were delicious, they sat at a table covered in a pristine white tablecloth, where the silver cutlery and glasses reflected the flickering of candles and the gourmet cuisine melted in their mouths. The mood between them was tense, not in a terrible way, but in that unique, sensuous tension that develops between people who are conscious of their mutual attraction. Behind the modest chats about the day's events, acquaintances, and trivial matters, a spicy sensuality lingered beneath the words. Michelle knew that Harry, whom they had mentioned in passing, had gone to spend the night with friends, so they had the place to themselves. They appeared to be storing their strength for later, when they would be left alone without extra eyes and ears. After a few glasses of pleasant but not overpowering wine, they decided not to stay too long. A faint mist of alcoholic warmth gave Michelle drive, and the barely apparent redness of her cheeks added to her vibrant appearance. They exited the restaurant, taking their time going through the silent streets, illuminated by the occasional streetlight. A mild evening breeze caressed Michelle's bare shoulders, playing with the folds of her garment. Oliver cast imperceptible glances at her, admiring her profile and the fluidity of her walk, the contour of her neck. Returning home, they crossed the threshold with a faint sense of joy. The space of the house welcomed them with subdued light. Michelle opened the drapes ahead of time, allowing only soft moonlight to filter in through the walls and floor, while little table lamps created a lovely twilight atmosphere. She acted quickly to seize the initiative, with a slight, confident, and graceful move. She led everyone into the bedroom, where the bed, with its massive duvet and pillows, appeared to be a haven of serenity and temptation. When they found themselves in the semi-shade of the chamber, Michelle realized it was time to quit trying to be a modest lady from high society, that person who never crosses the line of decency. Now she wanted to reveal him her true self, mature, feminine, liberated. She asked Oliver to unzip her dress. He approached with minimal nervousness but noticeable apprehension, feeling the cold of the castle and silky fabric under his fingers. The sound of the zipper being unzipped seemed almost meaningful, like a musical accent. And the dress? As if obeying the invisible law of attraction, it glided down Michelle's body, eventually pooling at her feet in a lovely braided puddle. Michelle arrived before Oliver wearing a deep-colored corset that complemented her attire and gorgeous stockings with lace elastic. The lamp's light highlighted the corset's small waist, making the silhouette even more feminine and sensual. Her elegantly elevated breasts appeared to be designed for appreciative gaze, as did the exquisite contours of her hips, which were gently rounded. Her figure has a unique, mature appeal. Stockings with fine lace along the top edge appeared to be a detail intended to evoke fantasy. Oliver stood there, unable to look away, full with admiration. He never tried to hide his shock because he had known Michelle for a long time and had always admired her maturity, intelligence, serenity, confidence, and style. Seeing her in such an explicit image was nearly breathtaking in his imagination. She abruptly transformed into the essence of female sensuality, a true goddess who descended from the heavens. He realized that before him was more than simply a woman in a corset and stockings. She had revealed her innermost intimate essence and entrusted it to him without embarrassment. Michelle observed Oliver's eyes light up and his lips shake with excitement, which boosted her confidence even more. Then, he abruptly requested her to snap a picture. This moment seemed a little risky. He took out his phone and, smiling modestly, said that he wanted to photograph her as he saw her now. Divine. Inspiring. Awakening a wide spectrum of emotions in him. Michelle, who had never been subjected to such sights before, was scarcely noticeable, astonished by her own agreement. She barely smiled slightly at first, but something inside her desired to try out this new role. She began posing as part of their fun relationship. She merely slightly poked out her hip, extending her leg to make her form appear even more alluring. Then she lifted her chin slightly and looked at Oliver, and the gaze was full of promise. The corset enhanced her breasts, giving the figure greater definition, and the stockings appeared to flow into her hips, producing a sense of unbounded sensitivity. She transferred her body weight to the other leg and slightly tilted her shoulder back, allowing the play of shadows and light to highlight the delicate line of her collarbones and the curve of her neck. The images were gentle and intimate, capturing not only female beauty but also an intimate moment. However, Michelle did not stop there. She gently extended her hand towards Oliver, removing the phone from him. His wonder had turned into a small shock. He hadn't expected her to want to photograph him as well, but how could he resist? Michelle was a magnet at the time, and it was impossible not to notice her. She took his position behind the camera, and he became a model under her silent but eloquent gaze. He recognized he needed to relax. He struck a confident pose, tense his arm and shoulder muscles slightly, then turned so that the lamp's light glided across his torso, emphasizing its relief. Michelle shot pictures for a long, smiling as she noticed how he was striving to appear more daring, confident, and calm. However, while examining the footage she had taken, she discovered that Oliver was still overdressed. She desired greater openness and equality in this sensual game. She hardly had time to imply this with a sly squint before Oliver began to remove his garments without further ado. He slowly and carefully removed his jacket, then undid the buttons on his shirt, showing his chest and abs, which, while not bodybuilder standards, were well-defined. Every gesture and aspect of what was going on had a specific value for them, creating a more intimate, close, and trusting environment. When he was finally completely naked, their gazes met in the dim light of the room. Michelle sensed a wave of silent understanding pass between them. They saw one another in ways they rarely did in ordinary life, confident, daring, and open to new emotions. It was a moment of pure adoration for each other's beauty, with no superfluous words, annoyance, or embarrassment, just two grown-ups eager to experience the full depth of mutual attraction. So this scene dragged on, becoming increasingly complex, laden with perfume aromas, body warmth, and light reflections on smooth furniture surfaces. Every movement, look, and rustling of garments and silk stockings. The carpet under their feet felt soft to the touch. Vague whispers turned to silent chuckles. Everything added up to an endlessly long moment that they wished to remember. These times proved to be valuable links in their relationship's chain, altering the bounds of their closeness and allowing them to go deeper than just words. At that point, they became accomplices in a minor secret, a ritual known only to the two of them. Oliver's hands, like obedient conductors of his emotions, glided carefully over her satin corset, probing every curve, every undetectable bulge, each flawless line. The thin cloth under his fingers felt almost ephemeral, like a gentle breeze brushing the delicate skin of the corset. His attention shifted to her beautiful, delicate legs, dressed in silk stockings with each thread appearing to be fashioned from moonlight. He slowly, almost reverently, unraveled the invisible web of garments that had previously hidden her body. He did it carefully, as if he were unwrapping a valuable gift, unveiling new aspects of her beauty and colors of femininity. Each of his motions was deliberate, but they were also organically formed from the depths of his feelings, rather as intentionally invented seduction stages. He was in no hurry. On the contrary, it appeared that he was striving to extend this moment indefinitely, drowning himself in the sensation of her presence, body, and breath. Michelle felt the patient, kind attention that everyone provided her. She could feel how, under his fingertips, all of her nerves transformed into sensitive strings, ready to sound at the least touch. She adored how he responded to every element of her body, from the slightest shift in her breathing to the delicate twitching of her lips, when Michelle arched her back and leaned forward. Her breasts were nearer to him. Oliver was unable to resist and pressed himself against her. He felt the warmth and softness of her shape, as if he were diving into the gentle foam of sea waves, a prisoner of his own yearning. He came closer to kiss her, taking in the flavor of her lips and breath. There was more than just passion in this kiss. It had a vast array of emotions, hopes, promises, and consolation. Breaking the kiss, he carefully lowered his head to satisfy another secret desire, to touch her breasts with his lips. He did this with such devotion, as if the object in front of him were a unique work of art, worthy only of adoring glances and meticulous gestures. But Oliver did not simply look. He showed her care, kindness, and acknowledged the uniqueness of each centimeter of her body. Michelle closed her eyes and surrendered to the moment. Her fingers lightly stroked his hair, happily immersed in its softness, as if in silk fabric. Their bond grew stronger over time. They were now alone in this almost stoppable time and space, free of extraneous sounds and problems. Like smoke spread by a gentle breeze, there was a beautiful, enveloping silence surrounding them, like a thin cashmere blanket slowly wrapping around their fingers, shielding them from the outside world's noise and bustle. The space was filled with penumbra, which reflected on the walls like paintings by an old master designed to accentuate the closeness of the situation. The light from the candles cast intriguing reflections on the ceiling, spotlighting one place after another, creating bizarre patterns that could be interpreted as representations of their emotions. Michelle and Oliver's gazes met at a point when no further words or explanations were required. This quiet dialogue that developed in the depths of their eyes exposed their souls to one another. It embodied trust, understanding, tenderness, and the ability to listen and communicate without using words. Her eyes were warm and clear, full of acceptance, and his expression revealed genuine thankfulness for her presence, for the fact that she was in his arms. Michelle slowly raised her hand, as if scared to disrupt the fragile magic of the moment, and lightly stroked his face with her fingertips. She continued her slow voyage over the lines of his features, starting with the slightly pointed and masculine chin, moving on to the distinct and confident cheekbone arches, sliding to the temples where life throbbed, and returning to the gentle line of his lips. Her fingertips caressed his skin with such care that it resembled the movement of a featherweight coming into contact with the warmth of a human body. Each of her touches evoked more than a bodily sense. It was like a message encoded in her gestures, a hint of tenderness and the depth of feelings she wanted to convey without using words. Oliver lifted his eyelashes, and in the dim room, his eyes shone with the soft glow of mutual tenderness. His breathing became even calmer, as if he had finally discovered a serene sanctuary after a long voyage across the tumultuous seas of life. Feeling her touch, he took her hand in his, stooping over her with a gentle but genuine smile, and brought her hand to his lips. He kissed her delicately, as if he were holding the most precious cup filled with the dew of emotions. This kiss was more than just a gesture. It was a symbol of profound gratitude and appreciation for her presence, the intimacy they had today, and every time they spent together. Oliver then extended his arms to Michelle, who replied with a trusting gesture, allowing him to bring her closer. Their hug resembled the confluence of two rivers, slowly and smoothly merging to form a single stream. Her head found the ideal position on his chest, as if it was designed to be there, capturing every beat of his heart. His arms wrapped around her form gave her a sense of security, as if he was watching over her serenity and ready to defend her from any problems in the outside world, in the hush that hung around. Only their breathing could be heard, and it was tranquil, as if some type of unseen melody accompanied their closeness behind the room's walls. A whole world may be filled with activity, noise, and speed, but here, in this sanctuary for two souls, peace prevailed. The candlelight continued to flutter, reflecting on the smooth surface of the furniture and the soft textiles on their bodies, creating a magical atmosphere. Second, minutes transformed into endless moments. It seemed as if time had lost its normal meaning. They did not need to speak. Every quiet touch, gaze, inhalation, and exhale was comprehended without words. Their mood and emotions vibrated in unison. Michelle felt Oliver's chest tremble under her cheek, catching the rhythm of his heart, a vibrant, steady pulse reminding her that he was real, that he was here with her in the twilight, somewhere, via the crackling wick of a candle. They could mentally tell each other thousands of stories. Michelle envisioned their future calm evenings in front of the fireplace, long treks on hilly roads, easy hikes along the seacoast, where the wind mixed with salty spray. It seems to her that every instant of their lives, every moment of intimacy, was a slender brick in the grand building of their connection. Oliver, feeling the weight of her head on his chest, reflected on how incredible their journey had been to this point. I remembered her grin from their first meeting. The minute their eyes touched, her voice was sweet and calming. He realized that their meeting was not an accident, but rather a gift from fate, intended to demonstrate that occasionally people come together to form one story. Michelle raised her head slightly, her hair sliding across his chest, making a warm, delightful path. Their gazes met again in the depths of her eyes. He saw a reflection of himself, her, and their shared moment. She was here with him, and it appeared that it had always been this way. Her smile was genuine and warm, and he wanted to remember this moment forever. Her palm sought his cheek again, as if attempting to seal it in the amber of memories, and then moved to his hair, caressing it, feeling the silkiness of the strands, soaking in every moment of this proximity. Outside the window, it could be raining, the moon could be shining, the wind could be singing, or there may be total silence. They didn't care. Inside this room, they made their own world in which only the two of them controlled. There was no fear, haste, or doubt in this realm. Just two persons who appeared to be able to read each other's minds by the warmth of their own bodies. Every inhalation and expiration, every moment of silence between them. Everything transformed into poetry. It is so subtle and translucent that no sound from outside can damage it. It seems that they were on the verge of more than simply physical connection, the point at when all souls are truly united, when words become unnecessary, when feelings express themselves. Hugs supersede all explanations. They persisted in this peaceful harmony that stretched on indefinitely. Michelle and Oliver are two sides of the same story, their lives entwined in a single pattern of affection and trust. "Are you feeling it?" he muttered and tenderly touched her hair. "What, exactly?" Her voice was calm, yet full of interest. "It's as if the entire world has disappeared, and there's just you and me." Michelle lifted her head to look at him. Her eyes sparkled, indicating both excitement and deep adoration. She leaned forward slightly. Their faces were really close. There was nothing left between them save a similar whisper. Her lips caressed his cheek before softly moving closer to the corner of his lips. However, she abruptly ceased, looking into his eyes. "I want this moment to last forever," she whispered, clutching to him again. He only smiled and hugged her tightly. Oliver sensed her heartbeat in sync with his. This unity meant more to them than any words. For a while, they just sat there, savoring the warmth and closeness. His palm moved down her back, softly calming her as she listened to his breath. "Michelle, you are fantastic." He eventually spoke, His voice was hardly heard, yet it conveyed complete sincerity. She responded with a soft, loving smile. This was a moment of peaceful, deep happiness, rather than overwhelming emotions. Michelle sighed after a few minutes of recovery. It was fantastic. It's simply a brain explosion. You outperform even my most optimistic expectations, Oliver agreed. We've got the entire night ahead of us, sweetheart. This is only the beginning, yet I've already liked it 4 times, so all bets are off. It didn't take long for Michelle to see Oliver was once again ready. He softly nipped her earlobe and said, "Now it's my turn." Oliver sat next to Michelle and ran his hand over her arm. His touches were soft and almost weightless, as if he was frightened to disrupt the moment. Michelle smiled, loving the warmth emanating from him and the sense of serenity that pervaded the room. "Are you always so attentive?" She smiled as she asked, staring into his eyes. Oliver leaned forward slightly to get a better look at her face. "Only with you?" he said, his voice gentle yet confident. "You make me want to be better and more attentive." Michelle lowered her eyes, appearing uncomfortable. "You say things to which I am unsure how to respond," she admitted. "I'm used to more formal relationships and everything seems to be going well with you." He caressed her chin, gently elevating her face so their eyes could meet again. "Because it is correct," he continued, looking into her eyes with the sincerity she cherished. "We do not need to rush or be anything else. Simply be yourself." She sighed and smiled faintly. "It's rather strange, you know. Being yourself may appear to be simple, but it is perhaps the most difficult thing he has performed for her. But I am here, and I am not going anywhere." Michelle gently touched his face, running her fingers along his cheeks, feeling the little stubble. "You have no idea how significant this is to me," she explained. "After everything that has transpired, I just want to know that you are nearby." Oliver grasped her hand and intertwined their fingers. "I want you to always remember this," he stated earnestly. "You do not need to prove anything, Michelle. Simply seeing you pleased is enough for me." She grinned. "Are you always correct? Is it your superpower?" "No," he smiled back. "My superpower is seeing you smile, and it is perhaps the most important thing I can do." Michelle laughed. Her laughing was loud and genuine. "Oliver, you are incorrigible, but it makes you more real. Did you believe I was playing a role?" he inquired with a faint mockery. She shook her head lightly. "No, it's just that I sometimes feel like I'm in a dream and I'm terrified to wake up." He leaned in closer, their faces just inches apart. "If this is a dream," Mitchell remarked gently, "then I'd like to sleep forever." She didn't respond. She simply held his palm tighter, letting herself to relax and trust him entirely. Their silence spoke volumes, and they were overjoyed at the time. He slowly pulled out of her and drew her towards him, caressing her tightly and affectionately. They appreciated the aftertaste of their intimacy, but with some confusion. They sat next to each other on the side of a large double bed, which was covered with a nice, pleasant-to-touch blanket, the hue of ripe plums. The room was at twilight, and the weak light from the night lamp cast odd shadows on the walls and outside the window. The rain was pouring quietly with lovely knocks on the window sills. There was an uncomfortable but somehow appealing quiet between them, packed with feelings like embarrassment, jealousy, curiosity, and excitement. Harry and Michelle had just been through something new, different, and risky, which might either change or deepen their relationship. Michelle ran her hand softly through her hair and looked away, as if she wasn't sure whether to continue the conversation, but she could feel the vibration of her own thoughts and knew Harry was waiting for her words. She stared at him again. Her eyes gleamed, revealing either a spark of passion or the vestiges of a minor strain. The voice was calm, but confident. I understand how terrible it was for you. You wanted it. You pushed me, but you probably underestimated how difficult it would be emotionally. I am not judging you. I am not blaming you. I'm just trying to comprehend both of us. We have reached terrain where the borders have yet to be marked. Harry nodded, sitting somewhat uncomfortable. He felt an odd combination of jealousy and excitement. We're now so inextricably linked that he can't tell them apart. He longed to know more, but every information was cut short. It was difficult for him to acknowledge to himself that thinking about Michelle with another guy gave him a strong, almost forbidden pleasure. He grinned faintly, ran his hand through his hair, and laughed, as if acknowledging his own weakness. I truly believed it would be easy for me, he admitted gently. I imagined what it may be like. I thought knowing you were having fun would make me feel proud, or maybe excited. But when you were with him, something unusual and painful entered your consciousness. Now that it's over, I'm trying to figure out what hurt the most, your pleasure, or my vision of how our partnership should be. Michelle leaned closer to him, her voice softened, and her fingers stroked gently along his leg. Lee, it's natural. We are people who learn. I would never have done this except you had recommended it. You wanted to explore different aspects of our relationship, and I trusted you. Now that this has happened, we must determine where to go next. I was quite impressed. I felt gorgeous and desirable, liberated, his sight and touch. He had an insatiable need for me. All of this excites me and gives me strength, as if I have become the center of the universe. At the same time, I felt in charge. I realized I was allowing myself to be different, bolder, and full of feelings, which was incredibly exciting. Michelle noted that, despite his stiff demeanor, Harry responded to her remarks. She sensed a slight throb of excitement flowing from his body. His eyes darkened somewhat, and his respiration deepened. She chose not to stop, and this was a type of game to see how he would react, establishing new boundaries and expanding the possibilities of their intimacy. He was in great shape, she said, stretching her words out like delicate silk. His muscles, sculpted and strong, appeared to support my every motion. He was neat, considerate, and really passionate about me. I saw desire in his eyes, as if he was overjoyed that I belonged to him right now. I enjoyed hearing his breath on my neck and feeling the tension of his arms around my body, and every time he took me to that delightful edge, I felt like a goddess dominating male passion. It was incredibly brilliant, like a huge electrical discharge. Harry, pay attention to this feeling. The terrible stings of jealousy and a growing, almost unbearable excitement mixed inside him. His imagination was at its most active. Drawing detailed scenes that both repulsed and fascinated him, he realized that, despite his discomfort, a new depth of closeness had settled in his thoughts, strange and pungent, like the flavor of a rare spice. He not only knew Michelle could be with someone else, but he also watched how her story made his heart race. Blood surged to his groin at the sound of her voice. Michelle saw this reaction and slid her hand slightly deeper, allowing her fingers to stay a little longer in the area where his tension was most noticeable. Her lips parted slightly. Her mouth twisted into a wicked smile. "It appears that some of you found this interesting," she added, lowering her voice to a faint whisper. "Perhaps you prefer to envision me with other men. Perhaps the thought that I can pleasure someone else makes my embraces even more appealing to you?" She paused, allowing him to digest her words like a sip of strong drink, burning his insides and leaving him peacefully inebriated. Harry closed his eyes for a time, attempting to create a response, but the words would not come. He felt embarrassment, shame, excitement, and a peculiar release within him. He finally concluded, "Maybe. Perhaps there's a spark here. I'm not sure what this means for us, but I can't deny that your narrative and the way you articulate your sentiments touches me." Michelle chuckled quietly, raising her hand and sliding a finger along his collarbone, then down his neck, resting it on his chin and lifting his face slightly to meet his gaze once more. Her eyes were warm and compassionate, and her voice was as comforting as a silk ribbon. It is normal to not completely understand. We are taking our initial steps into a new zone with no established norms. I love you and want you to be happy. If you'd want to visualize me in other settings, if you want to chat about your anxiety, I'm ready. Let me explore it with you. Her breath caressed his lips, and she kissed him lovingly, as if to thank him for his courage. Her kiss became deeper and hotter, reflecting the complex feelings they were both experiencing at the time. Her tongue stroked lightly across his lips, urging him to play a game that looked more liberating than ever before. They sat like this in a weird new environment for them. They were no longer the same, with distinct limits separating them. Instead, there was the possibility of new scenarios and enhanced sensory experiences in which their love could vary, shape, stretch, and constrict like breathing. Michelle continued to describe the man's touch, how she felt his body heat, how he whispered compliments to her, and how she felt her own strength and freedom. Harry listened, shivering within, but not from dread or anguish, but from an unusual throbbing excitement. Combine envy and admiration, as well as a variety of hitherto unknown wants. The longer she spoke, the more complex their emotions got. He stroked his hands over her back, then down, and felt her tremble, partly from the memories, partially from the fact that they were back together, close up as if there were no strangers. So they took their time, relishing every feeling, phrase, and sensation. Their bodies and minds opened up to new experiences. There were no more accusations in their talk, just a burning curiosity and a determination to push their limitations. Michelle went on to tell how she felt like a queen surrounded by adoration, and how she hoped Harry would be inspired as well, and Harry began to internalize these beliefs, transforming jealousy into fuel for his own dreams. In the end, they both emerged as co-creators of a new type of closeness, rather as victims of the scenario. When Michelle finally became silent, hesitating and pressing against his chest, Harry hugged her, recognizing that their relationship had progressed beyond ordinary jealousy and passion. They entered a larger place where they could openly discuss their wishes, explore new facets, and gain confidence in one another. The rain outside the window continued to rustle quietly, as if applauding their daring to immerse themselves in these new sensations. As long and deeply as they wished, the idea that his conservative 49-year-old wife had slept with a man half her age sounded ridiculous. But here they were. There was excitement mingled with jealousy. Harry fidgeted, trying to reconcile his contradictory emotions. "In certain ways, I believe so." Michelle unzippered his fly and began caressing him. "I viewed your browsing history. Have you been thinking about this for a long time? You are welcome to confess to me. We need to be honest with one another." Harry looked worried and did not respond. "Tell me, do you want this baby? Do you want me to be an attractive wife? Do you want me to engage in sex with other men?" "I do not know. It always turns me on when men find you appealing. Last night startled me. It nearly felt like I was proud of you. I believe the erotic aspect is that you are so attractive that you think about it, plan for it, and desire it. Also, you are aware of your passionate sexual side. I also discovered this aspect of myself. I know you enjoy it when I flirt and dress in a specific way. I can do this more regularly if you continue to be my support. Last night, I felt welcome. My confidence has skyrocketed, and I feel so much better. If it makes us both happy and we're honest with each other, perhaps we can pursue it further. I love you more than ever. It poses absolutely no harm to us. You mentioned other men. Does this suggest it's not just Oliver? He needs to meet a female his age. I believe it would be dangerous to become too close to just one. This will be so much fun. I will be your own gorgeous wife, but you will stay my husband. You've made it through the hardest portion, and I promise to stay dedicated to you. We'll do this together. Come to me, honey. With these comments, Harry unleashed a massive stream of water upon Michelle's skirt. God, this is all over the place. It appears that it is truly turning you on. That night, they made love with newfound fervor. The manner Harry took possession of her definitely reflected a sense of return. Michelle preferred his delicate and attentive touches, but she saw that his needs were influenced by her time with Oliver. Michelle had never felt more liberated and confident. They enjoyed their passion until late at night. This has not happened to them in many years. Did you wear this skirt for me or for others? Michelle smiled. You know the solution to this question. Harry observed his lovely wife at the BBQ. She was still wearing her favorite pencil skirt, but now it was leather. The heels were higher, and she was wearing the same bra, but under a satin top. He thought she looked fantastic, and couldn't keep his gaze away from her lovely ass as she walked past. Harry, like many other males, saw a young man who was openly looking at Michelle and turned to face him. Michelle met his eyes, and as she passed past, she smiled slightly. Harry realized that the man had spoken something to her. Michelle paused and began talking to him. Harry seemed nervous when Michelle sat down next to him. She touched his hand to continue the conversation, and the guy came closer. Harry watched as his gorgeous wife flirted with a young man, and Michelle looked at Harry as if assessing his reaction before winking at him. They kept talking. Perhaps 20 minutes had passed. She found herself next to Harry, looking concerned and timidly asking, "Are we okay, Harry?" mumbled a vague response. Her enthusiasm was clear. She began chatting about his name, Dan, and how he was a really relaxed and kind gentleman while talking to another man. Knowing you were watching was amazing. I was nervous and excited, so you'll have a lot of candidates. You charm all of the men here, but it's probably best if I stick to the single ones. Some of the spouses appear to be preparing to assault me at home. Michelle revealed how flirting turned her on. She enjoyed cutting conversations and hints, and it was pleasant to see how guys regarded her. Harry sensed the tension between them increase. This moment felt like a frozen picture from a movie, with every movement significant. Each word is significant. He took a step forward, hoping not to disturb this delicate but alluring balance. Michelle did not back down. Her stare stayed solid, but there was more to it. Hidden gentleness and preparedness for the unexpected. "Are you sure?" she inquired carefully, as if to ensure that they were both ready to take this step. "More than that," Harry responded, his voice raspy, as if the tension between them was impacting each note. She let him get closer, and their breaths mingled in this confined area. He gently touched her shoulder before running his fingers down. I can feel the warmth of her flesh through the thin linen. Her small sigh confirmed that she would not object. On the contrary, she seemed to have been waiting for this moment. He said, "You're so beautiful," without looking away. His remark sounded genuine, almost in a whisper. Michelle gave a small smile, her lips twitching with shame. She wasn't the type to accept compliments readily, but this one seemed so natural that she couldn't help but answer with a tender gaze. She took a step closer. Their hands came together, and the air around them appeared to erupt. Harry carefully moved a strand of hair off her face. Feeling his heart race, he wished this moment could endure forever. "Harry," she whispered his name, and there was so much warmth in that single syllable that he could barely resist the temptation to pull her closer. "Yes." His voice lowered slightly as he waited for the next words. Simply be yourself." "That was enough," she murmured, and her words contained more than just a call. It was a promise. They both felt that this moment would mark the beginning of something new for them. Maybe the best is yet to come. They had sex twice, and then again in the morning following morning sex. Michelle exhaled slowly and deeply. "Well, we can confidently claim that flirting turns you on. You were excellent." The following evening, they talked about everything over a bottle of wine. Harry confessed that he likes to dress up and flirt. Michelle concentrated on the fact that the sex following such events was just amazing. "Who were you thinking about at last night's cookout, myself, Matt, or Dan?" "To be honest, everything was mixed. Mostly about you, occasionally about them. Realizing that I could attract young, gorgeous men and be so confident in my interactions with them was a huge discovery for me. At 49 years old, I learned I like to flirt. Harry had reservations about where this could lead, but their sex life became more frequent and intense, and marrying a sexually confident lady added a whole new depth to their relationship." Michelle told Harry that she loved him more than ever. "Would you want to see Dan again?" Michelle's eyes widened and she paused. "He was pleasant, but I'm not sure about meeting people. We know we can trust Oliver, but I'm scared others may brag about their victories. Maybe we should just flirt." "Yes, that is a valid point. I guess you're correct. We may look into internet groups or contacts together to learn more." Later, after opening a second bottle of wine and being slightly inebriated, they began constructing Michelle's profile on a popular dating site for women and couples. They were able to view other participants after registering for free. Michelle was impressed with some of the single men before they began filling out their profiles. Harry described a lovely wife as 49 years old, with a magnificent figure of 38, 34, light brown hair, married, and eager for dates and enjoyment. He altered one of their vacation images, in which Michelle wore a beautiful turquoise evening dress. Cropping and distorting the shot made her face unrecognizable. Then he had an idea and repeated the process using one of Oliver's photographs. "You cannot post a photo of me wearing a corset and stockings." "Oh, I can. You appear quite sexy." Furthermore, the majority of the women on the site are pictured in or without underwear. With these lines, Harry posted the photograph. Michelle awoke late the next day with a severe hangover from drinking water, taking aspirin, and washing. She felt a little better after seeing the laptop. She dimly remembers them filling out the profile the night before. Nervous. She opened it and visited the web page. She was glad to find that the images remained anonymous even in daylight, but she grimaced as the corset barely held her curves. She then saw that the number in the corner of the screen had increased from 230 to 231. After verifying, she discovered that this was the number of likes on her profile. She nervously clicked on a few of the remarks. The first 3 read beautifully. "Such a gorgeous and lovely lady. Would you like to know each other better, maybe on a date? Chris, 26, is a wonderful figure, very attractive, and also married. It's even more spicy. I'm ready to be your ball at any time. John, 37, has 8 inches of dignity. I would keep doing this with you all day. Richard, 1818. Oh my God." Michelle slammed her laptop shut, slightly panicked as she calmed down. She realized she was feeling extremely good, knowing that literally hundreds of men thought she was attractive. She later presented the responses to Harry, who thought them amusing, particularly the more explicit ones. He reassured her that they could always stop it or alter the filters because they were not obligated to do anything. First, they choose the working professionals filter. The issue of age created a debate, certainly younger, but no 18-year-olds like Ryan. Michelle reddened terribly, and they decided on a 25-40-year range. The location within 150 miles, excluding their metropolis, greatly reduced the number of candidates for physical attributes. They chose athletic or fit. There was an option to filter by masculinity size. "Your size is ideal for me. but I'm just looking for something new. What was Oliver like? Perhaps slightly bigger than you. About 7 inches, I believe. So you enjoyed it? Yes, I enjoyed it. Michelle got a little excited just saying that. Here's the answer. More over 7 inches. No, I don't want anything big. It would simply be uncomfortable or painful. I can't imagine how actresses handle it. They're probably only training marks 7 and 8. The filter found 28 matches. A fast check removed even more applicants based on their appearance and other profile details. Any trace of hubris automatically resulted in elimination, leaving 11 in the end. They considered the next move and agreed that Michelle would send them a normal message. Hello. Thank you for responding to my profile. I liked yours. It would be fantastic to talk and see if we're compatible. It wasn't long before notifications for new communications came. Curious, they began perusing the incoming responses. Some were humorous, most were relaxed, and a few were a touch strange. They answered to those they liked, eventually becoming at ease with the site's protected correspondence. The list became shrunk, and a favorite emerged. James Michelle corresponded with him frequently via the website. She exchanged images, including one of herself in underpants, which Harry took at her request, while Jane generally sent photos of his torso. Michelle had just logged into the website when a picture of her outstanding body displayed in front of her. She didn't expect that and nearly choked on her drink. She asked Harry, "Do you mind if I send him a topless photo in return? It seems like a fair trade." James's response was more than enthusiastic. He complimented Michelle on her stunning curves and told her what he wanted to do with them. Michelle turned to face Harry. "You know, he probably feels satisfied when he sees me. I'm sure that's correct. Isn't it a little exciting?" The next point of contact was a chat on the website. They had a pleasant talk before James asked if they could do something sexual. Michelle invited James to undress and was shocked by his swift response. She couldn't take her eyes off of his six-pack. He was so toned and athletic that she just caught his words and shorts. Michelle cleared her throat. "Yeah." James sat in front of the screen, unable to hide his excitement. He was usually self-assured, but now it appeared like he had lost it. Michelle arrived on television, and her peaceful smile and comfortable posture immediately established a strong bond between them. Her glance was slightly mysterious, as if she knew more than she was willing to admit. "So, is everything okay?" Her voice was kind, with light overtones of fun, yet serious enough to indicate that she was waiting for a response. James swallowed and spoke with difficulty. "Yes, everything is okay." A faint smile appeared on her lips. She tilted her head slightly and looked at him intently, as if trying to figure out what was going on in his soul. "Relax," she whispered, nearly whispering. "Please trust me." James took a big breath. He felt the strain gradually lessen. Her voice was so gentle that there was no point in resisting. Michelle briefly vanished from the frame. James sensed that his heart was beating quicker. When she reappeared, he had the impression that something significant was about to occur, which he couldn't predict. It was a truly spectacular moment. She stood so that her entire form was reflected in the camera, surrounded by gentle light. Her red peplum, black stockings, and heels conveyed an air of elegance and assurance. James involuntarily held his breath, unable to look away. Michelle slowly strolled around the chair she was seated in before returning to her seat. Her motions were confident and even theatrical, as if she were playing a role in a lavish performance. She sat down in front of the camera, turning her head slightly to the side, and fixed her attention on him once more. "Just do as I say," she whispered sweetly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. James felt his breathing deepen. Everything that was happening was new to him. However, it is really natural. "So what do you think of me?" Michelle and James had a casual conversation that progressively became more personal, and James openly expressed his respect for Michelle's sophistication and dazzling appeal. He praised her flair and confidence, describing her charm as a blend of elegance and sexiness. Michelle smiled, little embarrassed by his remarks, but yet confident. She flirtatiously teased him, implying how simple it was to pique his interest by adding a little accent to his outfit, such as stockings or heels. James, moved by her remarks, let his imagination run wild and carefully shared his ideas. "You're so beautiful that it's sometimes difficult for me to find words," he added, his voice becoming softer, as if he was scared of shattering the beauty of the moment. "Your manners and style. It's all so fascinating, and I can only think how I'd lose my mind next to you." Michelle moved forward slightly, almost by accident, yet her actions had a fun quality to them. Fantasy can sometimes evoke emotions that cannot be likened to anything else. She responded with a loving smile. "But sometimes the most interesting thing is to leave something unsaid, right?" James smiled faintly, understanding how deftly she transitioned their talk from the apparent to subtle clues. He admired how her confidence and sense of proportion generated an air of mystery. "You're right," he said gently. "That's probably why you appear so mysterious to me. Every time I think I understand you, you show a different aspect." Their talk moved from amusing quips to deeper thoughts, producing a sense of tension and interest. Michelle appreciated the way her words and actions affected James, and he, in turn, pondered the hidden implications of every phrase she used. Mitchell conceded with a sigh that he knew how to keep things intriguing. "And it drives me nuts, but you know, in a positive way. Perhaps this is the secret to interesting conversations," she responded, her eyes shining with delight. "Don't disclose all of your cards at once, but leave some room for creativity." They continued to speak. They developed a special connection built on respect, light, flirting, and genuine interest in one another. "How was that for you?" "Amazing. You're something different. Can we meet? I really want it. I'm confident this can be arranged. We will get back to you. Bye." Michelle shut her laptop and gazed at her husband at the far end of the room. "Is everything okay, baby?" Harry gulped and nodded. "Climb over the table now." Michelle took a long, luxurious bath and soaked in the bubbles. She dried and straightened her hair before applying makeup. She wanted to appear fantastic, so she applied eyeliner, mascara, and eyeshadow, as well as bright red lipstick. She was prepared for both her boyfriend and her own pleasure. The thought was intoxicating. She gathered her cosmetics and grabbed the transparent black stockings she'd picked to complement her form-fitting taffeta dress. It featured a low cut and a big thigh-high slit. "Can you attach the back suspenders, baby?" "I cannot reach." Harry did this. His hands shook. He gulped when he noticed the stitches. "I recall the comment about the woman being ready for sex. Would you like to wear my panties?" Harry nodded and helped her put on a thin, dainty thong that highlighted her contours. He reflected about it, aware that she will soon be sharing this moment with someone else. "You can give him a small kiss, sweetie." He caressed her lips and sensed her building excitement. But Michelle only gave herself this opportunity for a moment before gently breaking it. "Damn. It's not too much, Harry. I'd like to save myself for James. Please help me put on my outfit." Michelle was ecstatic with Harry's answer and encouragement. He appeared to be managing things nicely. She stepped up to him and kissed his cheek. "Are you ready?" Michelle was garnering a lot of attention inside the pub, where they had arranged to meet James for lunch. They had just seated down in the booth when James entered. He was more than 6 feet tall, looked even better in person, exuding confidence. He introduced himself by addressing Harry directly and asking whether he would mind if he spoke to Michelle. Michelle thought it was a wonderful gesture. The three of them were speaking casually, with James focusing more on Michelle, and a flirty air was developing between them both. James stated that he had been in similar situations before meeting folks on dating apps, and that they had a lovely shared experience. He softly took Michelle's hand. He commented on how much he liked the feel of her smooth skin. He kept talking without letting grip of her hand. After 5 minutes, he released her hand and rested his hand on her knee. "I prefer the feel of nylon." Harry watched as his hands moved up Michelle's thigh and softly squeezed it. She was obviously excited. "Your legs are wonderful, and I just felt the top of your stockings. Women wearing stockings are quite sexy. It is one of my favorite things." Michelle softened slightly and sighed quietly. They proceeded to talk casually, with James exhibiting real interest in their past and what had brought them to this point. They stated that while this was a new and unique experience for them, neither partner would be dominated or humiliated. Harry laughed as James leaned down and whispered something into Michelle's ear. She put her hand on his leg and turned to face him. It was not a light kiss. After a few seconds, Harry noticed her mouth open and their tongues connected. The kiss was long and sensuous. When the kiss was finally over, they gazed at each other. Michelle then looked to Harry with a slight embarrassed smile. "Just breathe, honey. It's okay. We are still buddies." Harry realized he'd been holding his breath. Jane spoke first. "You're quite lucky. Your wife is incredibly attractive. I think you both deserve to be applauded for deciding to spice things up in your relationship. It might be an incredible opportunity for all of us." They returned home, with Harry driving and James and Michelle sitting in the back car, cuddling and talking. When they exited the automobile, they kept their distance to avoid the neighbor's stare. But as soon as the door to the house closed behind them, they jumped on each other, kissing fiercely, as Harry stood by and watched. Michelle looked down. "I believe we should disclose this before it becomes too unpleasant." She gently unbuttoned James's top, as if examining every detail of his appearance. Her hand caressed his shoulder, and the gesture conveyed compassion and trust. Michelle smiled and whispered, "You never cease to amaze me." Her voice was smooth with a tinge of excitement. James gave her a loving gaze, understanding her mood. Michelle directed her focus to Harry, who was standing a little further away, watching them. "Harry, help me," she begged, extending out her hand. Harry stepped closer and began slowly unfastening the clasp on her dress. His touches were gentle, even tremulous, as if he was scared of upsetting this delicate balance. James couldn't take his eyes off Michelle as the garment slid down, displaying her beautiful shape. "Thank you, darling," she said, patting Harry with her palm. James reached out, caressing her shoulder. Their eyes met, and everything existed in that moment: trust, genuineness, and a sense of intimacy. "Sit on the sofa, James." Michelle sat in his lap, facing Harry. Her legs, spread in stockings and heels, were stunning. "I believe you should watch me write it for the first time, but I will not do so without your permission." "So, Harry, what are you saying?" Harry overheard himself say. "Do it." "Michelle, have sex with him." "Okay," she replied quietly, leaning in and caressing his hand. It took some time, but they soon developed a peculiar intimacy that made her feel warm and comfortable. "Oh, that feels great, sweetie. I'm really happy." She smiled as she whispered. She began to move like if she were performing a dance, with each gesture packed with genuine emotion. Michelle stared at Harry, her eyes twinkling. Finally, she spoke softly. "Sorry, honey. I got so carried away. Why don't you relax? I want you to feel special, too." Harry found her calm description of sex with another man both terrifying and fascinating. As Harry undressed, James and Michelle exchanged glances and changed places. She grinned at him, generating a subtle and sensual tension between the two. James embraced Michelle. Their motions became more synchronized and assured, eliciting involuntary delight from all three. With each passing instant, their interaction got more intimate and trustworthy. The harmony that developed between them was new and fascinating for everyone. As the tension reached a climax, they felt a relief and a closeness that was impossible to articulate. After collecting their breath, they hugged one another, relishing the sense of tranquility and harmony. Michelle glanced at Harry, her eyes full of affection and thanks for this special moment. "Now, honey, we'll need some privacy to repeat this a few more times, so we'll head to the bedroom." She stood up. She extended her hand to James and guided him to the stairs. A few minutes later, Harry heard the familiar creaking of a mattress and bed, accompanied by his wife's moans and the hoarse sounds of her new lover. Harry finished his beer and headed up the stairs to look into the bedroom. He noticed Michelle lying on her back, with James pounding into her furiously. Michelle met Harry's gaze and grinned, sighing, before requesting James to have sex with her. Harder. He went downstairs again, tormented by conflicting emotions, unsure whether this excited or horrified him. He took a walk around the village, trying to organize his thoughts. Returning to the kitchen, Harry discovered James and Michelle in an unusual predicament. They had evidently forgotten that they were in a shared house. Michelle looked over her shoulder at her husband and smiled slightly. "Hello, sweetie, we won't take long." Harry froze, unsure what to say or how to respond. He did not expect this in his own home, and he preferred to offer them privacy. He silently turned around and entered the living room. He attempted to distract himself, but the sounds from the kitchen followed him until everything quieted down and the couple went upstairs. Around 7 p.m., James entered the kitchen and sat down at the table. He seemed exhausted. "Wow, what a woman. She nearly tired me. We chose to take a break. Michelle will be down soon. How about football? 3, 2, it appears to be in favor of United. I don't actually look at it." James shifted in his chair. "Have you ever attempted a different type of sex?" "Several times, but we both disliked it. Not ours." "I get it. I was thinking about asking her if you don't mind. It is up to her to make the decision. I haven't seen her for a long time." "Oh, sorry. If we exclude you, we can arrange a threesome later. She'll probably be in favor. That's how things are." Harry couldn't help but be irritated when he learned what his wife would be prepared for. And when James realized his mistake, he attempted to repair the situation. "She adores you, frequently mentions you, and is concerned about you. She seems quite communicative while having sex with you. What shall I say? She enjoys sex." The awful joke seemed improper. Harry gave James a stern look. "I think it is time for you to depart." James understood there was no use in arguing and hurried upstairs. A few minutes later, Michelle entered and sat next to Harry. "Have you asked James to leave? He gets dressed and claims you are upset. I do not comprehend. Are you aware that he wants to have a different form of sex with you?" "Yes. He said something about it, but I'm not sure. We didn't really like it before. If it's okay with you, I'll let him try. But only if you aren't upset. Oh, you realized I'm here, and my opinion matters. I understand now, I see. Sorry, I got carried away. I apologize for excluding you." At that point, James glanced in the door. "Okay, I will go. Thank you for today. I hope everything is fine." They heard the door close behind him. Michelle became worried. She kissed Harry while leaning towards him. "I am your sexy wife, right? I know you enjoyed seeing me so satisfied. He was just a machine, and it was thrilling when you went in. I love how it turns you on." "Too," Harry interrupted. "You must remember that I am not a cuckold." Michelle flinched as he spoke, his words filled with barely repressed wrath. "I know, honey. You can take me whenever you like. However, we are exploring our desires and boundaries. Sorry if I did something incorrectly. Let us see. You have sex with him for 5 hours while ignoring me after the first 20 minutes. What might go wrong? He then tells me when you'll be accessible. And for what? I assumed you wouldn't want me afterwards. He had intercourse with me for the first time. Lay down on the kitchen table. What happens now? You've heard. Remove your robe and lie down on the table where he had sex with you. Michelle appeared concerned but complied. She removed her robe and stood at the table, trying not to express her emotions. A tight silence hung in the room, broken by the sound of a gentle clap. "Hi, what are you doing now?" she exclaimed indignantly. "You must listen to me and not dispute." Harry spoke sharply, his voice forceful. He stepped forward, his stare determined. Michelle attempted to back away slightly, but his confidence stopped her. It was well merited, he said, maintaining a calm but authoritative tone. Her eyes shifted between astonishment and offense, but she realized it was pointless to fight now. "Well, try to explain yourself," she mumbled, trying not to appear insulted. Harry spotted the oil, took down his jeans, and applied it to his fingers. I looked at Michelle. "Have you really made a decision?" "Yes. You were going to do it for your partner, thus it is all right. Have you changed your mind?" "No, everything's okay. I trust you." After several cautious efforts, they eventually approached each other. Michelle had mixed sentiments, yet she sensed his concern and confidence. "What am I to you? You are not just someone. You are my hubby, my support. That is it. And I will always be here to support and protect you. James no longer matters." "Yes, you are correct. Sorry, honey. You will always be first." Following these remarks, they hugged, sitting on the kitchen floor, startled by how genuine and crucial their connection had become. Michelle's anxiousness began to diminish. She had never seen her hubby this irritated. "I've never seen you this angry or controlling. You've made me angry. I apologize if I went too far or was impolite. No, that was my fault, and I genuinely appreciated your decision. I would rather not debate and risk losing you. I am all yours." They needed time to go through their emotions. It had been a few months since she and James had met, and they had decided to take a long-awaited vacation, selecting a cruise to the Far East that they had been discussing for years. Harry appreciated Michelle's seductive appearance in the gorgeous evening outfits she had purchased for the ship's formal dinners. Surprisingly, Harry realized how much he missed seeing his wife's sensual side. On the second evening, they were invited to the captain's table. Harry saw that every woman at the table was quite gorgeous. Michelle was sitting next to the captain. He was a sophisticated and charming host who obviously enjoyed being the center of attention. The women, including Michelle, listened to his every word with apparent admiration. The captain danced with every lady at the table before asking Michelle for a second dance. Harry spotted his wife giving the captain an entranced expression. The captain leaned over and whispered something into her ear. Michelle returned to her seat next to Harry and murmured, "Do you want to discover your hot wife again?" "The skipper invited me to go up to his cabin." "No, Mitchell. I do not think so. I do not like him. He's a confident and self-assured individual who dismisses others with ease and believes he can achieve whatever he desires." Michelle seemed disappointed. "If you want to have some fun, pay attention to the junior officers seated to my left. They appear to be decent folks." Michelle gazed at them. "Wow, these are adorable. Would you mind?" "No. To be honest, I want to see that part of you again. Do you want me to only flirt or seduce? I believe we'll see how good you are at it." The captain was plainly annoyed when Michelle stood up to dance with one of his officers. Michelle was happy when another cop took the initiative during the second dance. However, the captain was plainly disappointed as the dance finished. The captain dispatched both officers to monitor the situation on the bridge and assist the night shift, emphasizing that this was an order, not a request. After that, he turned to Michelle and invited her to the next dance, but she declined, saying that all of her dances were already scheduled for her husband. Harry instantly pulled her to the dance floor and held her close as they danced. "Thank you for completing my request. Everything's fine. It's something we either do collectively or not at all. You were correct about him that night. They made love with great passion and compassion. They proceeded to enjoy their stay aboard the ship, declining additional invitations to the captain's table. 3 days later, Michelle sat on the sofa in their cabin between two younger officers. She kissed each man in turn, touching them both with one hand. Two pairs of hands hungrily explored her body as the officers unhooked her bra and began kissing and fondling her breasts. She looked at Harry. "Can I sleep with both of them?" "Of course. My hot and delicious wife. Show them what an experienced woman can accomplish. I will be back in 2 hours. Make sure you're finished by then. Also, don't entirely exhaust yourself. Save some energy for me. Okay, dear. See you later." When it all started, Michelle assumed she would be the center of their marriage. After all, she could use Harry's passion for her to dominate him, as she might with any other man, but things turned out to be totally different. Harry grew in confidence and strength, which she enjoyed. She was willing to do everything for him. She wished to explore new realities, but only with his assistance. The outcome was surprising and exciting. She remembered their prior monotonous sex life and shuddered at the thought. She knew it wouldn't last forever, but, for now, she wished their adventures would continue. Her thoughts were interrupted when the younger officer slowly began to have sex with her, while the other stood in front of her face. Michelle and Harry accepted the officer's invitation and attended the crew's private party. The enormous lounge cabin was filled with laughing, gentle lighting, and soothing music. The partygoers appeared comfortable, and the mood seemed informal. A middle-aged woman with vivid green eyes and short hair saw them the moment they walked in. She approached them with a friendly smile. "Welcome, I'm Emma. You are novices, correct?" "Yes, this is our first party of its kind," Michelle responded slightly nervously. "You can feel it, but don't worry." Emma softly accepted Michelle's hand. "There is no room for judgment, only for enjoyment and openness." Harry observed Michelle's expression. "Relax." Emma had a knack for making people like her. A few minutes later, they were reclining on nice sofas, accompanied by Emma and her husband, Mark. "So, what brought you here?" Mark inquired, looking at them with keen interest. "We're experimenting," Harry said, meeting Michelle's gaze. "This is still fresh to us." "Great," Mark nodded. "The most important thing is to be honest with one another and to understand your own boundaries. Do you have rules?" "Yes," Michelle said, "but only what works for both of us. Everything is discussed in advance." Emma grinned and nodded. "This is an excellent strategy. Mark and I both started with the rules. They become more flexible over time, but we knew it would benefit our marriage." After a time, Emma recommended giving a brief tour of the party to introduce Michelle and Harry to the other attendees. Michelle soon caught the eye of a group of young officers who invited her to dance. Harry, who stayed on the sofa, observed a woman sitting slightly further away. She returned his stare and grinned. After a few seconds, she approached. "Is this your first time here?" "Yes." "It is a little unusual," Harry acknowledged. "It's evident, but you seem relaxed. My name is Isabel." She spoke while extending out her hand. "Harry, it's good to meet you." Isabel sat down next to her and began discussing her adventures. Her soft French accent sounded extremely captivating. Harry felt pulled to this woman, but he remained focused on Michelle, who was laughing with the officers on the dance floor. Michelle returned to Harry with a beaming smile on her face. "You won't believe this. They're adorable and amusing. Jake remarked I resembled an actress from old movies. He's correct." Harry smiled. Emma approached just then. "Sorry for intruding, but Mark and I thought you would like to stay with us in one of the comfortable rooms." "There is no pressure. Just for a conversation or more, if you wish." Michelle stared at Harry, and her gaze clearly indicated, "Your decision." "We will try." Harry finally mentioned that they had found themselves in a modest, tastefully designed room with soothing lighting. Mark and Emma were easygoing as they began discussing travel and life perspectives. The talk gradually became more intimate. Emma sat closer to Michelle, their knees gently brushing. "You're beautiful, you know," she murmured, running her hand down the sleeve of her dress. Michelle smiled faintly and glanced at Harry, who was observing them. Emma moved in and gently kissed Michelle on the lips. At that point, Mark placed his hand on Harry's shoulder. "You're a very generous husband. This is a rarity." Harry nodded. I can feel the tension in the room rising. He realized that a critical decision was being made just now. Michelle kissed Emma back, and Harry felt his desire and curiosity take over any remaining uncertainty. After spending the evening with Emma and Mark, their friendship with Michelle took on new dimensions. They talked about what happened the next day during breakfast on the cabin terrace. It was unexpected. Michelle started drinking her coffee in a pleasant way. Harry focused on her gaze. "Yes." Emma was confident and gentle, and Mark was completely correct. "He seemed to respect your bounds, though. This is something new to us, but I feel safer knowing you're there." Harry nodded. "You were fantastic. I even enjoyed watching you. Freddie, you looked so terrible." He paused, as if thinking over his next words. I was thinking about what had transpired. I believe it brings us closer, but now I know I want to attempt it myself. Perhaps with Isabel. Michelle was stunned, but she immediately recovered. "Are you sure? She was nice, and I noticed how you connected. If that's your preference, I'm all for it." Harry was relieved to hear her encouragement. At the following party on the ship, Harry and Isabel had gotten close again. Michelle, noticing their interaction, gave him a little smile and started talking to Mark. Emma was occupied conversing with other passengers at the time. Isabel advised stepping outside on the deck to enjoy the night breeze. Harry agreed. They stood under a starry sky. Their chats get more and more candid. "You don't seem to be the type of person that frequently decides to do such things," Isabel remarked, leaning in closer. Harry replied, excited and vulnerable. "This is all new to us." Isabel smiled and her voice became softer. "Sometimes fresh facets show something wonderful." She gently touched his hand, intertwining their fingers. Harry sensed the tension between them increase. Isabel approached cautiously and kissed him gently. It was an entirely different feeling, not comparable to what he had with Michelle, but no less enjoyable. When Harry arrived to their cabin, Michelle was waiting for him. Her face gleamed with interest and eagerness. "So, how did it go?" she inquired, extending a glass of wine towards him. Harry smiled. His anxieties eventually became calmer. "She was fantastic, completely different. But it made me understand how much I love you guys, which strengthens our bond, you know." Michelle nodded. "I am pleased for you, and this delights me, knowing you found something new." They both thought that their marriage had progressed beyond envy and dread. They shared delight, honesty, and openness with one another. On the third day, Emma and Mark invited them to spend the evening in their cabin. This time, the talk started with a discussion of broader subjects like trust, limits, and how such relationships influence couples. "How are you feeling after everything?" Emma asked while pouring the wine. "It was fantastic," Michelle responded, glancing at Harry. "We have grown closer." Mark nodded. "This is the essential point. Many people are concerned that such experiments may damage their marriages, but for us, they have been a source of strength." Emma smiled as she approached Michelle and caressed her arm. "We'd want to offer you one more evening together. This time, we could make it a little more intense." Michelle and Harry exchanged glances, and Harry gave a tiny nod. Michelle expressed enthusiasm and trepidation as she added, "We're ready to try." The evening with Emma and Mark was a new experience for them. Together they pushed the limits of their passions, but this time Everything was far deeper and more emotional. Harry and Michelle felt extremely close, even when they were surrounded by others. When the night was over, Michelle whispered to Harry, "Thank you for this. I never imagined we'd come this far while being so close." Harry held her, feeling like their love had grown even greater, following an adventure-filled voyage. Harry and Michelle have come home. Although their time on the ship had opened up new possibilities for them, returning to familiar surroundings was fraught with mixed emotions. They appreciated the tranquility, but they also felt unable to return to their previous schedule. Everything seemed incredibly quiet, Michelle murmured, looking around the comfortable living room. "This is weird given what has happened. Weird, but not horrible." Harry embraced her. "We have time to process everything that occurred." Michelle nodded, her expression thoughtful. "But you want to continue, don't you?" "I see it in your eyes." Harry smiled. "Don't you want to?" Michelle thought about it, remembering how much she enjoyed those moments with other men while Harry watched, turned her on. She started worrying again, but she also realized that her husband was still the most important guy in her life. Perhaps we should move forward, but cautiously. A few weeks after returning home, Michelle and Harry decided to attend a local club's couples event. The evening was completely anonymous. Couples talked with masks, adding to the event's mysterious and lighthearted mood. They were approached by a couple named Steve and Lily. They turned out to be really open and nice. Steve, a fit 40-year-old male, struck up an instant rapport with Harry and Lily, a gorgeous brunette with bright green eyes who piqued Michelle's interest with a hint of coquetry. Lily said, "You have amazing energy," watching Harry touch Michelle's hand. "You obviously love each other. It is the foundation of everything we do," Harry responded, glancing at his wife. Steve turned to face Michelle. "I can only image what it must be like to witness your wife being courted. It must be quite exciting." Harry nodded, feeling his excitement rise. "That is true. But what I really enjoy is seeing her have fun." Michelle felt a little wave of warmth after hearing these words. She turned to face Steve. "Are you certain Lily isn't jealous?" Lily laughs, her voice beautiful. "I get a little jealous now and again, but it's a good sensation. It reminds me that he's still mine." Later that evening, they all found themselves in a nice chamber with soothing lighting. Harry and Michelle felt at ease since they knew they were in a respectful environment. Lily began first. She moved over to Michelle and lightly caressed her shoulder. "You are fantastic. I hope you don't mind that I go first." Michelle looked at Harry, who nodded with agreement. Lily kissed Michelle gently. Her movements are both forceful and kind. Steve, standing next to Harry, smiled slightly as he watched this. "Would you mind?" he inquired, staring at Harry. "No, I trust her. And that is the most crucial factor." As the dynamics in the room eased, the people began to interact with one another. Harry's arousal peaked as he watched his wife enjoy herself. When it was finished, they returned home to the solitude of their bedroom. Michelle lay down on the bed and gazed at Harry. "It was fantastic. But I need to know, were you actually okay?" Harry lay down next to her and run his hand through her hair. "It was a fresh experience, but it just strengthened my feelings for you. You were happy, and that is the most important thing for me." Michelle grinned and clung to him. "Thank you for existing. I understand that this may all appear unusual, but to me, it simply enhances our bond." Harry hugged her tightly, feeling that their relationship had reached a new level of trust and closeness. Since then, they have been more intentional in exploring the realm of open partnerships. They went to parties, mingled with other couples, and explored their fantasies. Michelle and Harry established clear limits that made them feel safe and secure. They also recognized they needed to rest. Their evenings alone become more heated and passionate than ever. Harry and Michelle learned that each new encounter deepened their love for one another. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened.